oh, hey, puer delicatus, your master's married now, so you're going to have to grow up, stop trying to shave and look young.
And so I suppose if you're an emperor and you're just fucking everybody all the time, at some point you're going to be like, an asshole's an asshole, you know?
Yeah.
Like, let's try this.
Because I think there are a lot of like masculine men who are attracted to twinks and femboys and stuff like this.
Wait, so he could just go to the court and go, hey, I want to kill myself.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yep, basically. Yeah,
Okay.
Because it was illegal. Because I like stopped denying the Holocaust in like 2017, 2018. Sorry, yeah.
Your first video was a debunking of a Leather Apron Club video about homosexuality in ancient times. And he's done a few of those. There's like, how gay were the Greeks? How gay were the Romans, etc. And I know he's gone a bit deeper down the political rabbit hole recently, if you've looked at his channel. You said that your first, you didn't know if you were going to continue a YouTube channel afterwards. You were sort of just inspired to debunk that, probably because of your own political history, and then seeing that kind of thing and being interested in history yourself, it inspired you to make a rebuttal. Had you had ideas before that about starting a YouTube channel or making videos, or was it just you saw that and you're like, fuck this, I need to do something?
Not, I guess in a way, I've had sort of an interesting career in that very early, like fresh out of college, I started working for this company called Machinima, which some older people might know was like a gaming YouTube kind of space. Yeah.
A little predatory, but it was the name back then.
I would say more than a little, and I can only say that because they're completely defunct now, but still. From there, I got to work at kind of other digital companies, and I very much came up in that digital space. So I actually met and worked with a lot of YouTubers. So I was very familiar with the space. And seeing it, I actually, in many ways, was like, man, I'm not interested in this because it is a lot of work. You have to do not just making your videos, but you have to keep your social media presence high. You need to really be pushing yourself out there. And I was actually doing quite well. I started my own business, and I started being able to get hired for gigs by myself, hire other people to help crew with me. And so things were going pretty well. Then when my wife started her PhD program, she decided it was across the other side of the country. And so we moved, and where we moved to didn't have nearly as much entertainment work. So I'd made a lot of money throughout my career, but now I just had a lot of time on my hands in between these jobs. So I was watching YouTube and I saw his video, and initially I actually was like convinced by it. It was really, really interesting to me because for me, it was like, oh, wow. I didn't know this. I totally thought the Romans were much gayer than what he was saying, which basically his claim was that homosexuality was never commonplace or accepted by the Romans. It was basically quite rare, and when it did happen, it was detested. And having the standard, I think, internet view of homosexuality was common, but it was only okay for the top, it was just interesting to me to see, oh, I guess I might have been wrong about this. Then
top meaning the active partner, not top of society.
Yes, the active partner.
Just to clarify.
And so then when I looked into, because he was nice enough to provide all these sources, and so they took a while to find, but I started digging in, and I remember I read the first one, which was about a boy being like kept in chains, and then he's like, he's a debt slave essentially, and so the guy wants to sleep with him, and then the kid keeps saying, no, I don't want to sleep with you, and so he starts like beating the kid because that's his slave. You can punish your slave for being disobedient. The kid runs out into the street. The plebeians see the state he's in, and they immediately run down to the Senate and demand that Roman citizens be protected from this type of abuse when they fall into slavery. Specifically, he was a debt slave, so he borrowed
so he
some
had
money
formerly
from that guy.
been a citizen.
Exactly,
because I understand that for a long period of time, like sexual abuse against your slaves was just they're your property. You can do that, but it's different if it was a Roman citizen to then being a debt slave, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because it was a right. Yeah, like it's your property. Like no one's gonna get mad if you punch your chair. Like that's your chair, man. Like
It's so fucked up.
No, it is. It's very messed up. But it's like this is also the lens that you have to view a lot of this stuff with.
Yeah,
is that
you can't apply modern morality to. I was talking about that on the last podcast with Meta Bashir because he's into history as well. It's like you recognize that. Yes, we can have our own moral leanings and to think that these are absolute and correct, and to an extent they are, but there's also modern bias, and you just can't apply modern moral lenses to historical events.
Yeah, and I think it's also like it's good if you hear that and you go, wow, that's disgusting, that's horrible, I think that shows that we've grown as a society and that we've developed like, you know, better morality around stuff like that. But I think it's also, that's one of the problems of judging these ancient peoples, because to these ancient peoples, it wouldn't be evil in the same way that, I don't know, let's say in 100 years, everyone's vegetarian or something like that. You can't look at modern meat eaters as being, and I eat meat just for the record, but like, you can't look at
veganism's an eating disorder.
Yeah. So like, you can't look at people who don't ascribe to a certain moral set of values as like inherently evil and knowing that they're evil.
Yeah.
But so anyway, so getting back to the Leather Apron thing. So I read that first source and I was like, this isn't really about being like gay. It's really just about him not wanting to sleep with this guy. And then I started reading his other sources. And I remember like turning to my wife occasionally and going like, this guy is just like kind of slightly misreading a lot of this stuff. And then I got to this one quote.
Still trying to be charitable.
Well, because my whole thing is, for the most part, I try to treat people from the information they present. It's important to me to deal with arguments and not character. Because I think it's very easy to say, oh, this person has this politics, this person believes this thing, therefore everything they say is wrong. But I think sometimes you can find cool ideas that come from politics and people that you might disagree with. And so I think I think it's important to engage with ideas as they are. So for the most part, I was trying to engage with him from an idea perspective, not necessarily from like a who he is perspective. And in some ways, I think that's what was successful about my video.
Just to cut in for a second there. Yeah, it's I think it's very, very important to not only look for things that contradict your own worldview. Like I like to take information from left, right, up, down, whatever. It's good to have both sides so that you can make your own nuanced perspective, but also as an individual and when you're looking at other people, to not associate ideas with identity. Because I think people fall into the trap of tribalism and fighting each other. It's like, oh, you don't believe the same things that I do, therefore you're a bad person. Or people get stuck in their own worldview and ideas because they think if they changed them, then if they were wrong, there was something wrong with them. You know, it's like, well, I now believe a different thing, which means that I was wrong and therefore I'm worth less. And so they fight to maintain ideas, even if they know that they're not good ideas.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's an important part. No.
I think that's one of the best. This is one of the things I really appreciate about your videos, is that you do your best to cite all of your sources in a clear and easy to access manner, and that you are viewing things from a fairly impartial stance. Like, even though you disagree with this guy, there were a couple of times in the video you're like, well, to his credit, you know, he was fairly right on this. It's just like, even though there were very few times where that was the case, you were still fair in your assessment of him.
Yeah. Like the Virtus thing, I think, was a good example, because when he talked about that, I actually do think there were ways in which he was misusing those quotes. But his overall claim about like Romans caring about masculinity and self-control and having these very clear gender roles for men versus women, that's all true. And so from when I looked into it and it seemed right, I didn't see the need to then be like, oh, you know, I guess he's right about that, or somehow be begrudging, because it was just like, yeah, I agree with him on this, so I'm not going to spend time debunking him here. But the thing that really got me, the thing that like inspired the video originally, was I got to this one quote that took me forever to find. It was a minor declamation by this guy Quintilian. So declamations, first off, are basically like Roman transcripts of court cases in a way. It starts with like, you state what the pro side is, what the anti side is, and then usually you just give the arguments of whatever guy you're trying to exemplify for whatever reason. So this can be you, this can be someone else. And then sometimes you say what the outcome was, but not always. Sometimes you'll just give a brief summary of the other side's arguments and move on. So minor declamations are short ones, because normally these are quite long, because obviously these big speeches in front of a Roman court, they're going to be very flowery and attacking the person, because they didn't have, you know, our modern issues of spurious argument and stuff like that. You could attack character all day long. That was very valid evidence. So it took me forever to find. And when I finally found it, I realized that he had framed the quote as something like a poor guy yelling at a rich guy, "You rich don't marry, you only have those toys of yours, those boys imitating women." And every translation I could find didn't have that. it was much closer to the context is a poor man and a rich man have the same stuff happen. The poor man now wants to, like, in their lives, and the poor man is upset about this, so he now wants to kill himself. And he has to go to the Senate to ask permission to do this because otherwise his heirs won't get any of his property, meager as it is. So the rich man is arguing.
Wait, so he could just go to the court and go, hey, I want to kill myself.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yep, basically. Yeah, because
Okay.
it was illegal. Suicide was illegal. And the punishment obviously would go against your heirs. It wouldn't go against you.
Right,
I mean,
because things were far more family-oriented, I
Exactly.
understand.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like debts and everything got passed on. And I read something as well that was murder for a while in the Republic, at least, was not a public matter. It was a private matter. So it's like, if
Yes,
I killed you, if your family wanted to pursue a case against me, they could. But if they didn't, I just got off scot-free, no problem whatsoever. Because it was a private matter.
the only exception for that, I think, was people who held office or people who in other ways were like in the public eye, because that was a different deal. But yeah, like,
so then it becomes like assassination
exactly,
rather than murder.
But yeah, just me killing you. I mean, who cares, really? So that was the moment that I realized the initial quote was actually something closer to the poor man saying to the rich guy, we both lost our wives, but you can keep going around with these slave boys. So it's not saying he doesn't marry. It's actually saying that they do marry, and that when they lose their wives, because they still have their kids and everything else, they can just go to Pleasure Town because they don't care. Whereas he, as a poor man, probably can't even afford like a prostitute, so he's stuck by himself. And
yeah, it's more of a class issue than a sexuality issue.
Exactly. And if anything, he's jealous of the guy. Like, he's saying, like, I wish I had these slave boys. So it's like weirdly a pro-homosexual, though even saying it that way, I don't know. But yeah, so like, and I remember turning to my wife and going, so then I looked up the quote. I actually put it in quotations on Google because I was like, where did he find this wording? And I found this scholarly article by this guy, Ramsay McMullen, from like I think it was like from the 70s or something, called Roman Attitudes to Greek Love. And I suddenly realized that Leather Apron hadn't read any of these sources that he was claiming to have read. He'd read a couple scholars, not checked the work of those scholars, and then presented it as if it was his own work. And I remember turning to my wife and going,
biased secondary sources and then just repeated them. Yeah.
Yeah. And doing so uncritically, because sometimes what he would do, it's like I'd understand how he could say it based on the way the scholar was framing it, but it had nothing to do at all with the underlying point he was trying to make. Like, several times he'd reference things due to like rape or sexual assault, and he'd run into this problem of the scholars wouldn't quite be saying that. Like, they'd be talking about rape, but they'd just be talking about it in terms of like laws, and they'd include straight rape right next to gay rape. But he would only focus on that because that's all he cared about. And then suddenly I just sat down and I was like, you know what? This is so stupid. I'm going to make a video about this, because I'd already had like a document and I'd been like tracking down these sources and typing stuff up. And I was like, I'm going to make a video. And I never thought anyone would care. I remember this was just a fun little side project while I worked on building my business. Didn't care in the slightest. And it took me, I think, like 6 months. I actually got married during that video. I was technically engaged when I started it, and married by the time it was published. And it just like slowly grew into something where I actually ended up with so many sources. I've had professors reach out to me since then, congratulate me on my research, and ask if they can use it in a classroom setting. So it's like this like months-long research process of tracking down these sources, reading other scholars, checking the scholars, because I didn't want to take their word for it, eventually is what evolved into me making that first video. And that was it. I was going to put it out. I actually put it out right before my wife and I went on honeymoon. So I just put it out. I was going to be done. I was going to move on with my life. But then when I saw the response it got, because I think it got, I had 0 subscribers, I'd never put anything out before, and I got like 30,000 views or something like that. And I was like, oh, I guess people resonate with this. And so then when I got back, I said, well, let me make something about Nero, because that was a really interesting part of my research too. And then from there, it just kept snowballing to I kept getting more ideas. People kept liking the content. And now I'm like slowly trying to pivot into doing it more and more. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the Nero video as well. It's always interesting. It's that old saying, history is written by the victors. And when you have something like Rome that was couple thousand years ago for a lot of it, you have to, it must be very, very difficult to get the quote unquote truth of a lot of things. And I do appreciate that you try to remain impartial, and you're like, well, look, this is what these people said, but people are biased. It's though believe it was Elizabeth Bathory, you know that one?
Oh yeah,
Not Roman history, but the woman that was accused of bathing in children's blood in her castle and stuff. And now people are looking at those sources and being like, well, these could have just been other wealthy people around her that wanted to fuck her over and take her property, you know?
And that's very much what, like, Mary Beard, who's like a very famous modern, I think she's British, classicist. A lot of what she points out is like, we need to take all these documents and understand the context in which they were written, because these people weren't, I mean, they were writing history, of course, but they were writing history under emperors who wanted history to come out a certain way. In the same way, Aeneid, starts with a prophecy about how Augustus is going to rule Rome. And I'm pretty sure that when Aeneas fled Troy, no one was saying to him, hey, by the way, Augustus is going to rule Rome. I think it's important to, like, acknowledge those things when you're looking at some of this stuff.
Yeah, try to include people's biases in your evaluation of it. Why? Here's my question. Why do you think so many, like, issues of acceptance of homosexuality aside, why do you think that so many of the emperors had homosexual tendencies?
I mean, personally, I just think it is a little more common than we like to admit in our modern society. I think in a number of ways, the things you grow up with, like if you're told it's okay to feel this, it's not okay to feel this, and you're given these not even saying it's not okay to be gay, but even framing things as like, you are gay or you are straight. Like, these are
putting labels on it.
Exactly. Like, this is the binary option. It gets to the point where it's like, maybe you find a guy cute, I don't know, when you're like 12 or whatever, but then you find like 300 girls cute. And so you're like, well, I guess I'm straight, because if I was gay, I'd find 300 guys cute. And it's like, no, I think there's more, there's
definitely
more,
some fluidity to it.
Exactly. There's more room than that. And so I think
it's interesting. Sorry, on you go.
No, by all means. But I think that when
it's interesting.
Sorry. No, you go. Okay, I'll go. But I think when you're talking about, like, the emperors, another thing you have to keep in mind is these were men who had access to just ungodly or perhaps godly levels of wealth. And so you run into the thing of, like, anything they can imagine is essentially going to be open to them. And so, occasionally this ends up with Nero, where, you're building an indoor pool to, have a Colosseum battle. He tried to recreate a sea battle by flooding the Colosseum, including supposedly introducing fish to the Colosseum. And it's like, yeah, if you have that much money, you can probably get away with that. But imagine flooding, I don't know, like Manchester Stadium right now to try and do some sort of naval battle. Like, the cost of that would be prohibitive. So I think that also allows for these men were able to explore a lot of that a lot more. And I think that's why, though you have evidence of open male-male relationships occurring, not even just in the upper crust, I think that's where we get the majority of the records, because these men, I think, were afforded a little bit more freedom than in some of the lower classes, where I think there was no problem with visiting prostitutes, and there probably was no problem with even engaging with men romantically in a certain sense. But, like, committing to someone and not getting married and having kids and carrying on your family.
You gotta have a family.
Exactly. That was, like, the bigger issue. So I think a lot of times the reason we hear about it is just because they're emperors and they weren't necessarily restricted in that same way.
Yeah, and it's probably the whole thing. It's like even straight people. Let's take it from the lens of, like, debauchery, right? And I'm not saying that homosexuality in and of itself is debaucherous.
Sure.
But you look at like pornography use. Most people even report as straight. If they use a lot of pornography, they end up looking at gay content afterwards, because it gives them more. It's like they're just looking for more and more extreme. Yeah. And so I suppose if you're an emperor and you're just fucking everybody all the time, at some point you're going to be like, an asshole's an asshole. Like, let's try this.
And I think too, like, there were cultural institutions. Like, we think about the puer delicatus, which is the, like, beautiful or luxurious young boy. And this was a slave boy, so this wasn't like a consensual or romantic relationship necessarily. But, like, this was a common Roman cultural institution. So this shows that if you had enough money, you would even hold up these boys as, like, a status symbol. And Seneca even rails against...
There's like a mentorship aspect to it as well, which is interesting.
No. That's
not to these ones specifically.
That's like a more Greek version of that kind of model. The Roman version was these boys were slaves. They were not...
Right.
Yeah, there was no end where they were going to get lifted up to status for the most part. Yeah, no. And like Catullus, I I mispronounce everything because I just read everything and then I end up reinforcing the wrong pronunciation.
No one's pronouncing Latin and stuff correctly anyway, so fuck it.
Yeah. But Catullus has a poem where he one of the very few Roman marriage hymns that we actually have. This long song they sing during wedding ceremonies. And in his song, one of the things he says is, "Oh, hey, puer delicatus, your master's married now, so you're going to have to grow up, stop trying to shave and look young. You know, you're either going to have to become a prostitute or just be a normal slave, so figure it out." And it's like, it's funny, but it's also very messed up when you think about it, that it's like, this was the end for these boys. There was no place the puer delicatus was going to go after this, yeah.
Jesus. Yeah, because I suppose they were perhaps afforded some sort of luxury if they had a wealthy guy, you know. Maybe.
While they were young and beautiful enough,
While they were,
no.
submissive and breedable.
Yes, exactly.
Jesus. It's interesting to see as well that the classifications for these things are different. It's like we have a modern view of things like homosexuality and stuff, but then you look back then, it's like they didn't really have a word for gay. It's just like they described the behavior more than the label for the behavior. So it's like that's not a homosexual man. It's just it's a guy, and it was more about the gender role as well. It's like, are you the active partner or the passive partner? And that informed how they viewed you. So the passive partners were viewed as lower status in most cases, and then the active partners, it's like it wasn't even really seen as emasculine. It's just like, well, you're the one doing the fucking, so who cares, you know?
Well, and it was very much that, you know, sexual conquest was the right of the victor, and so you know, topping being the active partner in that kind of relationship in some ways was displaying your masculinity. And so the I think a lot of times when people talk about, oh, they hated gay men, the specific term they're referencing is pathic. And what I found through my own research is there's actually a ton of pathics who are lifted up, held up as heroic, seen as like actually being virtuous in some capacity throughout various points of Roman history. But that I think there was a stereotype around it because these were men playing the woman's role during sex. Yeah. They were the receptive partner, the bottoming partner. And so as a result, that stereotype could be used or ignored as their political opponents needed it to be. So if someone was being pathic, but you kind of needed their political support to pass some piece of legislation, it's not that bad. We really shouldn't care about this. He's a great guy. But then the second, you know, you need people to attack that guy, suddenly you go, oh, and he's bottoming, blah, blah, blah. So it's interesting to me where that wasn't even quite as hard and fast a rule as much as it was a stereotype that, again, could be applied or not applied as was politically expedient.
Yeah, and it's almost, from my understanding, it's almost like they're just treated like women are in society. It's like, well, if they're politically powerful women, and then they're politically powerful women, people will chase after them and all of this sort of stuff. But if they then want to be denigrated, it's like, oh, well, it's just a woman. So if you're the pathic man, it's like they're not considered necessarily masculine and strong, but if they have certain qualities, they'll still be respected for those qualities. But then when it comes time to pull them down, it's like, oh, well, that's a pathic man in this sort of position of power, and therefore they're worth less. It just depends on the angle, as you say.
Yeah, there's a really interesting story from, I believe it was the time of Marius, so like 2nd century-ish BC, if I'm getting my numbering right, where he has a soldier in his army who is pathic, and they are going to actually set up like one of those famous things where you take the best fighter from one army and the best fighter from another army, and that's who decides the battle. Rarely did that actually decide the battle. You'd probably still have a battle afterwards, but it would at least give what do you call it? Rally. You know, it would bolster one side and disbolster the other. I don't know why I can't think of the word.
Yeah,
morale. But so demoralize. There we go. So at first, Marius actually doesn't want this guy to fight because he's a really good soldier. And so Marius is like, well, I don't want to risk this guy losing because then I'm losing such a good soldier. And then one of his generals says, yeah, but he's a pathic. So if he does lose, like the men won't quite care as much. And so I think Marius allows the combat to proceed like that. And again, it's a really interesting case of Marius being like, this unmanly pathic man is a great soldier. He actually is like very useful in battle. But then someone points out, yeah, but the other men think he's kind of unmanly. So that might work if he loses. And then like that to me was one of the stories that really illustrated that interplay so well of kind of how the stereotype could run into men who didn't fit that stereotype.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not even like it's just like homosexual men today.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Honestly,
Yeah,
and that's something I talk about is that like modern homosexual culture, modern gay culture, bottoms are seen as lesser in a sense. They are still
Mm.
seen as like the Twinkie femboy would never be a top. That isn't always the case, but I think there's still that stereotype, and so it's interesting in a certain sense to see things haven't changed that much in 2,000 years. Because I think there are a lot of like masculine men who are attracted to twinks and femboys and stuff like this. They just either can't admit it, or because in their own head they just go, well, I'm not gay, so whatever feeling
Mm.
I'm feeling towards this feminine man as I'm like looking at him, that must be something that's not sexual because I'm not sexually
Yeah,
attracted to men
yeah,
as a broad category. So I think
yeah. They
like
justify it. They're like, well, it's dressed as a woman and it has tits, therefore,
exactly.
you know.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's where like a lot of the problems stem from, is that like that thinking lies behind so much of like
Mm.
modern conversations around sexuality. No.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that in general, men tend towards masculinity, women tend
Sure.
towards femininity. But I think a lot of the problems that arise now with sexuality and with gender
Yeah.
and like all the trans stuff, it's like I'm a very libertarian person. I'm of the perspective that you should be able to do whatever the fuck you want with your own body, and the government shouldn't step in either way. They shouldn't enforce it. They shouldn't stop it. And it's like if someone comes along and they want to be called she and use a different name or vice versa, I don't care. That's your own personal thing. It's when it gets to the point where it starts being like a enforced political stuff, I think it gets dangerous, because then people's ideas skew, because there is a lot of social element to everything in life, like the way that we view ourselves and other people. Like people think of themselves as independent, but that's not really the case. We're like ants. We are part of a hive mind structure. Yeah. But going back to the like reasons for homosexuality, one of the interesting ones that I heard was that there's actually some evolutionary, and Evo Psych is really dodgy
I was
stuff
gonna
to get
say,
into because
yeah,
it's all based in fucking it's you know, you're just drawing correlations essentially, um but one of the interesting theories put forward was that it would be very helpful to have more men around in a society that weren't interested in women. A, because they wouldn't have children of themselves, so they'd be more available to help take care of other people's children and stuff like that. And B, that would cause less competition over women who are less sexually able to you know, there's a longer gestation period, etc. Sure. So you have the same amount of men and women, and that might be why there's more gay men than gay women as well, supposedly. It's just helpful to have a bunch of guys around that aren't competing and aren't making their own kids, just so they can still contribute to society without causing conflict and tension.
That's definitely a possibility. I think, yeah, in general, I tend to push back against Evo Psych, and I think one of the things that I find
it's often used for really dodgy arguments as well.
But one of the things,
especially in the dating niche and everything.
Yeah, one of the things I think is so weird is how we think about like gay men and gay women. I think in a number of ways, it's like if you're a guy, you are gay or you are straight. And like even now there's bisexual, but I think most people, if they hear you're a bisexual dude, they just think you're gay. There's no middle ground there.
Yeah.
And with women, because it's so funny, you'll see a guy who's like, yeah, when I was in college, one time I kissed a guy. And I didn't like it at all, but I'm gay. I think I just am a little gay as a result of that. And then you'll see women who are like, yeah, when I was in college, I had like 3 long-term girlfriends and I was like hooking up at orgies, and I'm completely straight. Yeah, I'm a completely straight woman. So I think that's part of it too, is like when you talk, because most of this stuff comes from self-reports. And I think for women, the category of straight is much broader than the category of straight for men. So I think that's why.
Like, well, I didn't fall in love with these women and want to spend my life with them, therefore I'm not gay, you know. And it happens the other way as well. It's like you'll see guys that talk to pure lesbians that are only interested in women. They're like, well, you know, one good dick could fix her.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that, and that's the whole thing too, where it's like, even if she did take the one dick and like it, okay, well now she's bi at best, like she's still not straight, you know what I mean? Like to me, I think a lot of times it comes down to like the way we think about stuff and the categories that we ascribe to people, because I just think that so much of like, to your point about humans being such social creatures, it's like you just grow up with these very clear, like, you are this label or you are this label and yada, yada, yada. And so I think that's why sometimes you end up with these weird, disparate things, because what I might consider a gay man and what I might consider a gay woman might not be what the gay man considers a gay man and a gay woman considers a gay woman. And I think that is a big part of the problem that we run into, is we're kind of talking at cross purposes sometimes.
Yeah. People have different understandings of things.
Yeah.
On the subject, I'm trying to find a way to segue this, but I can't, so I'm just going to ask it. How did names work in Rome?
Oh,
because I understand that. Yeah, it's like, was it Gaius Julius Caesar was also Julius Caesar, and then there was Caesar Augustus, who was Octavian before that, and it's like some people have 3 names, some people have just one. What the fuck is the deal?
So this is an area that I've seen it so much in my own research, and I almost refuse to look into it because it annoys me so much that I almost just refuse to. So what I'm about to share, again, I'm going to say this might be wrong. I might, because I have not studied this a lot. But everyone essentially had at least 2 names, and that would be your family name and then your first name, your praenomen.
Right.
9 times out of 10, your praenomen was the number kid you were. So Octavian was the 8th son.
Was the 8th.
Right. And not all your kids would survive to adulthood, because obviously child mortality was higher then.
Yeah.
So that's how Octavian had a couple brothers and sisters, but not 8 brothers, or 7 brothers rather. But like the reason that he didn't was probably because most of them died in infancy. So Gaius Julius Caesar, as an example, he came from the Julii clan. So the Gaius would have been his given name, and then Julius was his family name, and then Caesar came from, I think, his specific branch of the Julii, because obviously there were sub branches within the larger families. So my understanding is that basically Romans only had like 20 first names, and so the reason sometimes that you'd be like, Gaius Julius Caesar was because you needed that many names to identify who you were talking to. In the same way that like in the modern sense, if you are running into 2 people who are named Ben, and then I might say, yes, Ben G, or I might just call you by your last name or anything like that. Like, we use that
just so many fewer names.
Yeah, because it was. I genuinely think, I'm totally going to be wrong about this, but I swear it was less than 40. I swear they had like 30 first names or so. Yeah, like nothing. So it'd always be like Marcus Salvius Otho, because you'd have to go like 6 names out to indicate who you were talking to.
Right.
And then with women, it gets even worse, because for the most part, they would just get the name of their family's name feminized. So we have like Claudia the Elder, Claudia the Younger, and that's really just to separate 2 people whose names were both Claudia. No one ever would say this was, like Claudia X and Claudia Y. They were both Claudia, and it's only later historians who will indicate it's the elder and the younger, because that's the only way they can differentiate who they're talking about. So yeah, it would get confusing like that.
Is there the accuracy of history and stuff like that? I imagine doing research for these videos is very, very difficult and time consuming. Is there not a collective bank for like online archive or something like that? Is there not a bank where you can find all of these sources collated into one place and organized well? Because I understand we're talking about thousands of years of history here, specifically about Roman stuff, but you would think, again, because most of the sources have been lost, that, how many sources are we talking about? 1,000, maybe?
Probably less than that. Probably. The thing that gets tricky though is what you define as a source. So like, very recently, like I'm talking like in the past 20 years, we found our first piece of evidence that Pontius Pilate was the proconsul of Judea during the time of Christ. We had no evidence of that outside the Bible, and we found one inscription just a couple of years ago that indicates that. That is the problem I'd run into a lot, is like when I was doing my Nero research, the historians who wrote about him, Suetonius, Dio, and Tacitus, are very hostile towards him. And so there isn't a lot to pull from there. And so finding that papyrus, there's a poem that I reference where Nero is spoken of far more positively. That suddenly becomes an important piece of evidence. There's letters you can find that include snippets of Nero's poetry. That suddenly becomes important. And so while there are repositories, the Perseus Library is a great one with a bunch of these older texts in them. The problem that I would run into is, if I'm trying to analyze the validity of like the popular, big historians, I have to dig into the weeds of some of this stuff. And some of it, like Quintilian's, 337th minor declamation, were only translated into English once in the 1600s. Right. And that's the only thing you can find of it. So it's like, there is a central repository, but one of the big problems is there's just so many, like, there's a letter over here that's super useful for this argument, and there's something over here that's useful for that. And then because you don't want to cherry pick, you still have to kind of compare it to a general corpus. And so that to me is the problem with, like, there not being a central area for all this stuff, is that so much of this stuff is like one-off inscriptions that just tell us, oh, someone was here, and so therefore that can paint this type of a picture. And that's, I think, what is both so complicated but also so interesting about digging into those parts of history.
Also, if you were to try and compile all of that stuff, there would be, like, just linking them all together and going, well, this is from this. You would also have inherent bias from the person that was putting it together.
100%, yeah.
So, one of the sorry, my fucking
you're fine, dude.
Broken leg is my excuse. Okay, I've been hopping around for days. I'm fucking exhausted.
That just means it was a good trip. That's all it means. All right. If you come back with an injury, honestly, it was a good trip. Yeah.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I want to get into the religion stuff later, because I'm fascinated by the esoteric and the occult and stuff. And you recently did a series about the religion and the mystery traditions and stuff like that, which fascinated me. But one of the things that you said was that his name begins with V. Varro, was it?
Varro, yeah.
Trace the origins of the Roman religion to Samothraki?
In a sense, he saw a similarity there, that he said, because the Greeks obviously were older than the Romans, and the Romans liked old stuff. He saw it as like, oh, perhaps this is where, like, I think he's specifically relating it to, like, Plato's 3 forms, and then relating that to Jupiter. So it's kind of like, if A, then B, if B, then C, if C, then D. It's like, it's a bit of a game of telephone, but yes, he's essentially saying that some part of Rome's religion came from the cult, the sanctuary to the great gods, which is at the time, was one of the most well-known and oldest mystery cults in the Mediterranean.
I rewatched that video again today, and it hit me, because I was like, that's where I was. That's where I broke my ankle, was on Samothraki. Yeah. And I was going to go to the forum, the Temple of the Great Gods, or whatever it was called. I apologize for butchering the name, but I looked up the reviews for it, and it's like, oh, the guide there is really shitty, and they don't let you take pictures, and you can't really walk around, and it's like, it's not well maintained. It's just not worth going there. I'm like, all right, cool, great. Yeah, I actually wondered, because we went up to a nice cold pool with a waterfall and everything. It was amazing, and that's where I slipped and fucked myself up. And I'm like, is there some sort of nature spirit up there that doesn't like people messing with? You should have
sacrificed to the local artist. You could. There's plenty of formulas.
Yeah, left some tobacco behind, or some sweet wine or something.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so sad, honestly, how much those, like, older sites really do fall into disrepair, because there's so much like, man, there's so much stuff you run into, honestly, of, like, these inscriptions where, like, half of it is destroyed, and you are just, like, so upset that there isn't that other half. And it's just because through most of human history, people didn't care, nor would I expect them to. It's like, people always talk about the Elgin marbles, and there is a certain argument, I think, in, like, bringing from the Parthenon back to Greece, of course, and now the British Museum is even doing that. But certainly, I think there's a thing where when Elgin himself, like, showed up, there were just farmers just letting animals graze on the steps of the Parthenon. Like, no one was really doing upkeep for it at all. And I don't even think those people were in the wrong, because to them, it's just like, look, I got to feed my animals. Like, I don't necessarily care.
Yeah, it's like people taking pieces of the Colosseum for other building materials. It's like, it wasn't so special. It's a cool building, but it's just a building.
But it's just a building. Yeah, and it's like, I got to feed my family, dude. I don't care necessarily so much. So yeah, it's so interesting.
It's not like you have the internet today where everything is fucking chronicled. Things are disappearing, things are getting deleted. There's data erosion and stuff like that. But there's a far better historical record for the future, and it will probably become overwhelming at some point, whereas people are scrambling to find sources then. But it's, until we have a time machine, it's just gone forever. You just have a fragment of paper, and you'll never know what the fuck the rest of it was.
It's like we've lost the last of Tacitus's work. And so when I'm writing about Nero, Tacitus, who gives the most detailed account of Nero's reign by far, he gets into, I think it's his 16th book, and he writes about basically, like, Nero is putting Seneca to death, and Seneca is about to give a speech to the people to say what he thinks right before he dies, and that's where it cuts off.
What it is.
And it's just like, great, love that. That's just, ooh, boy, that's fantastic, Yeah.
Historical blue balls. So what other, just things getting not only things not only disappearing and getting lost to time, but also misinterpreted. And obviously it takes a while to correct the historical record on things, especially if some things are taught in school. Like I remember, I believe I learned this in school. They were talking about the vomitorium thing, and they thought it's like, they were so debaucherous with their orgies and their drinking that and their constant eating that they have a place to go and throw up, and then they go back to it. And it's like, no, it's just the word for the place where you exited the building or whatever. What other things like that are you aware of that are like the really pertinent ones? Prominent ones.
Man, I mean, for the most part, I'm working on like covering a lot of that stuff right now.
Fuck yeah.
My next video, I don't know when this is going to come out, so this may have already come out, but in September of this year, I'm planning on releasing a video going through the Proto-Indo-Europeans, which is this idea that I briefly covered in my religion video about this sort of like group of people that came to Europe as well as India and then made it up through all the way into like Iran a little bit as well. And they kind of overwrote the culture there. And so basically we all come from this one culture that had this like one monomyth. And that is just not what the evidence shows at all. The evidence shows there was a people, they definitely migrated outwards, and they definitely introduced their language and a couple cultural things. But culture is important to people. And those people who were living in those places didn't just surrender their culture when something better came along. That's one I'm trying to push back on right now. I think in general, a lot of the misconceptions are like very general. Like I think a lot of times when you talk about like gladiator games or slavery is a great example, because slavery, I think we think of today as such a uniquely bad thing that like no one would ever engage in it, especially like willingly become a slave. But because of how slavery was viewed in ancient Rome, you'd actually find a lot of citizens, Roman citizens from noble families, willingly selling themselves into slavery to gain something, whether they were trying to become a gladiator, which you couldn't be as like a citizen in good standing. So they'd sell themselves into slavery so that they could fight in the gladiator games.
Which was a dangerous job, but not nearly to the extent that people think. It's just people dying all the time. It wasn't like that at all.
Yeah, because for the most part, I think it was under Augustus, like the gladiator fights to the death became really frowned upon. And then you have women from the same thing. They were subject to a tax if they didn't have a certain number of children. And so these women who didn't want to pay the tax would just register as prostitutes. They'd sell themselves into slavery.
Sorry, a tax. I heard a tax. I'm like, what?
Oh, no, a tax. They would be taxed they would get money taken from them by the government.
Wait, so you had to have a certain amount of kids, otherwise you'd lose money?
Sort of. It was under Augustus, and that law was rolled back almost immediately. People hated that law. But yeah, so these women, they just become prostitute. Like they wouldn't have to work as prostitutes, but they'd go to the censors and say, "Hey, I'm a prostitute now," and they go, "Oh, well then you're not on the roll of good people." And then they're like, "Great, and now I'm not subject to the taxes, so see ya." So like there was like that kind of stuff. So a lot of what I think for me is the more interesting misconceptions are these general cultural institutions and how they were viewed. Because I think for the most part, you can go into specifics about like, you know, people misconstrue how barbarians were thought of, or people misconstrue how Romanization, you know, the taking of conquered lands and teaching them Latin and raising them to Roman values, like how that was handled. But for me, I think that's like boring in a sense. I think what's more interesting is like, how did Romans think about prostitutes? I think that's like a much more interesting thing to dive into. And it's something that most people don't even think to question, because especially if it maps on to like your modern understanding, what's the point of even like questioning that view? It's so
it's the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
I suppose there are more similarities than there are differences in sort of societal structure and politics. It's like people have been peopling forever.
Exactly.
They've always been doing the
100%.
same sort of stuff. And Meta in the last podcast said that as well. It's like all of the history is done. It's just affirmed for him that everybody has the same problems. People are cheating on their wife.
Basically,
you know, it's like it's all exactly the same stuff. Do you see any parallels between the political sort of system then and now, if you want to get a bit dangerous with it?
I think not necessarily in the system itself, other than the fact that we built a lot of our political system based on some of those things. It's really interesting. I do recommend, if anyone's curious, to go back and read the Federalist Papers. Well, as an American, that's all you should read. Magna Carta, everything else stupid. All right, Federalist Papers are the only thing that matter. But when you read some of these people trying to figure out like, oh, well, should we have two presidents? Should we have one president? You know, should we have like consuls that, you know, pass the fasces to each other? Should we just have one guy? Like, should we have like a bicameral legislature, or should we just have like, you know, appointed judges pass these laws? Like, how should we organize this? a lot of that stuff I think was debated, and in the end, I do think what they built was a very flexible system, and I think that's kind of the advantage of it. In much the same way, I think Rome's Republic was a flexible system. It allowed
Mm.
for, if suddenly, the people were upset that the debt slaves were being beaten if they weren't having sex with their masters, like, they can run straight to the Senate and say, hey, change this law, and then the Senate can change that law. Whereas with a monarchy, if you have one person and they say, no, I don't want to change that law, there's nothing you can do. Whereas with like a bunch of different senators, you don't have to convince one guy. You can convince a plurality, or a majority rather. But like, you can work in that sense. I think in the same way that there were cracks in the Republic by like the norms, the things that sort of evolved over time to like, this is how we're going to do it. It's not codified, but this is just how we're going to like pass this stuff. That's a lot of the parallels I see. So not necessarily with the system so much as with the way the system is starting to buckle and break.
Right.
I think in a lot of ways, like what we see now happening with Trump in America is ruling through executive order. But this didn't start with him. In a number of ways, I think Bush pushed it and Obama pushed it very, very heavily, where because he had a Congress that didn't want to work with him, he would just sign executive orders that then, of course, when Trump came into office, he overturned. And so we developed this norm of, well, the president gets to set a law, and then we kind of have to wait till it goes to the courts or to Congress to figure out whether or not it's actually a law. And this norm, we're now seeing the problem with it. And we're now seeing why something like this wasn't considered in the Federalist Papers. I think that is sort of the parallels I see, not necessarily in the specifics of what's happening, but in the general sense of like how we're finding out that, much like the great prophet Isaac Asimov pointed out all those years ago, humans are garbage at coming up with rules. No matter what, we will find a way to get around them. And I think that's what we're seeing in a lot of these, in America at least. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also of the opinion that absolute power corrupts. Absolutely.
Yes,
It's very, very difficult to have any system of power that doesn't eventually become a bloated, evil fucking thing that just seeks more control and more power. That's what it does. It's almost like an egregore. You have a system, and it's not even the fault of the people that are there. It's just like, that is what it does. I don't know.
I think too, like, I love democracy. I'm very much a liberal. I'm very much a shit lib. Whatever slur you want to call me, I'm probably that slur. But like, I personally think one of the beautiful things about democracy is the flexibility. I think that the mandate of the people, I think a lot of times people interpret it as the mandate of the people is important because it lets you, the people support you and they're always going to pick the best leader. And I don't think that's it at all. I think what it really is because the people say this is who we want, they're less likely to rebel. And because you check in every 4 years, you're able to address the concerns that the people are going to have, so that once a generation, we don't have to kill off like half the men in a stupid civil war over who the next king is going to be. And I think this is why when you look at China, when you look at Russia, when you look at these countries that are much more dictatorial, they still have elections. They're not having elections just to pretend to be a democracy. They're having elections so that they can collect data and so that they can then like directly address the concerns of those citizens to the extent that they want to. Yeah.
I think you've just altered my opinion a little bit on something. So for the past few years, I've held the sort of spicy take that the best form of government we have at the moment is a benevolent monarchy.
I think a lot of people
or just a monarchy
in
general. Yeah, because democracy it's more widespread. I think the centralization of power is both incredibly dangerous, but also a massive benefit to the people, because there is one single target. If the people want to rise up and overthrow a king, it's very, very easy to do. And also, if you have a king or you have a queen, I feel like because their terms aren't just 4 years, they can't get away with nearly as much, and they're more incentivized to keep the people at least somewhat happy, so as not to be beheaded. And then they're also more future thinking, because it's like, well, I'm passing this down to my own son, therefore I want things to be reasonable for them. So there is a check in place just from that.
Well, I mean, I'd argue the opposite, actually. I'd argue that like when you're given a right to rule, like one thing you run into is like what we see right now happening with Trump and the tariffs, right? Most economists, and we don't know how it's going to shake out. Obviously, I think they're not good, but maybe he's right, who knows. But basically you have like an enormous number of people saying this is a bad policy. Mr. President, do not do this policy. It is a bad policy. And he's saying, I don't care if it's a bad policy. I think it's going to work. And maybe he's right. Maybe he actually happens to see something no one else sees and he's going to be completely right and we're all going to look stupid in a couple of years. But the problem is, because especially like when I was researching Nero, that's what I saw a lot. He had some amazing ideas and zero understanding of how to implement them or the problems that would come about from trying to implement them. And so I think one of the real problems with the monarchy, as much as you're saying it's easy to overthrow a king, it's not. Because the other thing with the monarchy is you don't just get the centralization of political power, you get the centralization of capital. And so what you're going to end up with is you have to convince these soldiers to fight not for money, but for love of country. And as much as I think that's like an easy sell, when your like family is starving, you're going to take the job that's going to pay you money to go kill the people who actually do love their country. Because it's that's just like a natural thing.
If you do get the help of the army, they're just going to raid the coffers for themselves. And then suddenly you have a military dictatorship instead. Woo!
And this is the US ran into this problem. And when, you know, that we'd get these socialist countries coming up in South America, and then we'd say, oh, well, we don't want that because we want favorable trade, so we're going to overthrow them. And inevitably, when we overthrew those, socialist countries, it'd be a dictatorship because now you have someone who has no mandate of the people. And so the way that they can maintain control is fear. It's like Machiavelli, I think, often gets a bad rap as being like the evil guy. I don't think he was quite as evil as people.
I think it was satire. It was more like a pointing out the things that are wrong kind of, and then people, I don't know. That's my opinion anyway.
He has some good advice. I think he does. But most of his stuff isn't like you need to crush everything all the time, always. He's basically just talking about like, look, people need to love you, sure, but they need to fear you because your number one job as being, a king is to not have a rebellion. Whereas your number one job as a political leader, like a president, is to get people to vote for you again in 4 years. Like that, I think, is a big difference that allows for more dynamic responses to the needs and wants of the citizens. And I think it is slow. And I think also what you run into is you'll get these fringes that are very vocal online who want something that the majority of people just don't want necessarily in a given country. And that can make you feel crazy because you feel like everyone wants this. Why isn't it happening? If only we had a king who could get through all the red tape. But at the end of the day, I think those kind of slow processes are better. And what you instead run into with something more akin to a monarchy is we're going to try this time. That king dies. Okay, now we're going to try something completely different. And maybe you happen to live under the king who gets it right. And then good for you. You get to live in a golden age. But if you don't, you have to live in like the worst time ever. And unless you want to, again, like wipe out half of your economic population, you have to just put up with it for like 30, 40 years.
Yeah, I'm not even looking at it from like a will of the people kind of. It's more of a, if you're gonna roll heads, it's easier to roll fewer than, because once it becomes a big bloated, like I am for the smallest government possible. Sure. I think it should be as small and as local as possible. I also think that if you or I wanted to go and like buy a piece of land and then stick our own flag on it and go fuck off, your laws don't apply here, you should be able to do that. But we have this system in place where if you try to do that, some men with guns will come and put you in a cage. So it's hard. But I think that, and it's a kind of fucked up way to look at things, and people don't like thinking like this, but
no, they do not.
Every time some political change needs to be made, it's always done with force. Things do not get accomplished with voting; they just don't.
Well, but
I haven't seen any historical thing where that's a case. It's always people rise up and bring the fucking swords and guns out, and then stuff changes. Well, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse.
I think even in our own time, you can look at like the South Korean coup that just happened, where they voted to stop the coup. Like, I think when you think about the collapse of the Berlin Wall, like that wasn't really a violent revolution. Like there was violence in various parts of the Soviet Union, but it wasn't like suddenly the entire Soviet Union stood up and said, we won't stand for this. Like it was a lot of people just deciding we want to do, and it was a slow process that even...
I think those are smaller changes within a larger system, though. Like you still have an authoritarian governmental system in place that holds its power through the use of the monopoly of force. It's still, well, we have the nukes, we have the tanks, we have the guns. What the fuck are you going to do about it, kind of thing? And most people don't care to change anything, which is fine. If you're happy living within a system, that's fine. And again, these are extremist views. I think that there should be an ability to not consent to be a part of a system, and you can't do that in most of the modern world.
I definitely do agree with that. I think there needs to be more areas for experimentation, which for me, I think is saying the same thing you are, that there needs to be a way that I can go off and try some new system to see if that system works. And currently it's
you are seeing that in very, very small places, but it's mostly very rich people like making a deal with the government to open up a village to like try some weird stuff. They basically want to like run certain AI models or experiment with genetics, and they can't do that in their own country because it's illegal. So they're dancing around the red tape with money.
But I think that gets to the problem. And like, I'm a hardcore capitalist, but I think that's one of the big problems of capitalism is that capital does give like a really unfair advantage to the capital holders, that like if I have a large amount of capital, I can go try my own social experiment. And if you don't have a lot of capital, even if you have a much better idea than me, you can't really go try it, because how are you going to convince some government to let you operate on their land? Like, I can just pay them, so who cares?
I think at the end of the day, it comes down to there is no good system.
Well, but I agree with you, actually. But I think that's sort of the point, is like, it's not that there's no good system, it's there's no perfect system. And so I think the best kind of system you can build is a system that allows for self-correction. It's a system that allows for flexibility and like movement within that system. And that's something that like I think democracy allows for more than monarchy, because there isn't really like a self-correction on monarchy other than a violent revolution. Like when you were talking earlier about those are smaller changes within a larger system, you're right. But I think that's like by design, and that's almost a better way to do things, rather than like, well, what we're going to do is we're just going to replace the king with a different king, and now that king's going to have a better system, which maybe they do. But again, it's just go ahead.
Maybe I'm conspiratorially minded, but I think it's just the same thing with extra steps. It's like the democracy isn't really a thing. There are certain people who are in power publicly and certain people who are in power behind the scenes, and it's one that are in power behind the scenes that are really making all of the decisions, and they're not voted in, and they're not part of it is more like a family line nepotism sort of thing. And I am of the opinion that whether you vote for fucking Trump or Biden or Clinton, it doesn't fucking matter. Like the surface level policies, which are usually about like individual identity or you know which country we're gonna be friends with and which one we're not, or it's usually about an individual person's issues. But the issues that they face never really actually change anything. It's more just like can I express myself in this way or that way, or what's my tax rate going to be, or this and that. But the people that are in power, like the game at the end of the day is to create a facade, an illusion of choice, to make people fight about certain issues so that they think that their guy is the one that wins, but then nothing actually changes at the end of the day. And the people who are quote unquote making these policies don't really care which way it swings, because it doesn't affect the actual structure of the system.
So I actually used to hold that view. I genuinely did. And for me now, I just think there are very clear differences. I think when you think about like abortion or gay marriage or something like this, like the fact that right now in America it is much harder to get an abortion than it was under Obama is like a real tangible difference that is affecting people in a serious, significant way. The war in Ukraine, I think, is like a real tangible difference that's affecting people, and how Trump was handling it versus how Biden was handling it. The Affordable Care Act, something for Americans who are just so behind on healthcare, but like that was a big step forward for us. And I think a lot of times like there are people who want to do good. And I think that as much as you're right, I think there are people who are unelected who wield an enormous amount of power. I mean, Musk is he the perfect example of that at the moment, or was at least. I think that that's still going to exist in a monarchy as well, because at the end of the day, I think you're always going to be somewhat beholden to people who can give you what you need to govern. Because at the end of the day, like the person who is technically in charge of a country is dealing with a lot of competing interests, and some of those people under them are going to have a significant amount of power. Like when you look at the revolutions throughout history, usually they're financed by the aristocracy in some sense. To your point about it not changing that much, it's kind of because at the end of the day, if you want a revolution, you need guns, you need food, you need vehicles, like you need things that can allow you to actually mount a resistance, an armed resistance to some of these people. So as much as I like agree that there are definitely problems in the system, I think that's a little more inherent to just like the system of human organization in general. And that's why for me, I've moved much more towards really loving democracy and loving a lot of more liberal ideals. Because for me, I think it allows for those corrections. It allows for the slow progress. It allows for acceptance of trans people. It allows for acceptance of gay marriage. And these are things that really do affect people in a real significant way. I think if you like what you want, not you specifically, but just proverbially, if what you want at the end of the day is something like socialism, the tougher thing there is more just convincing the people to go along with it. But like, if you can convince a majority of the people that it's good, this is a thing we can try, and capital owners aren't even necessarily going to be able to stop it in a traditional form. And something like that, like a system that allows for the system itself to become a different system, I think is very cool. And I think that's something that's like one of the big advantages of the kind of liberal system that I advocate more for now, because that's just like, that's something I think that you're not going to get as much when you look at some of these other systems. And I think the idea, again, of like all parties are the same, everyone wants the same, like Brexit was a big thing. Like that is a thing that has affected a ton of people. One side didn't want it, one side did. Like, I think there are real differences between the parties that we like to overlook, because at the end of the day, I think people are just in general disaffected with how slow things are.
And I again, I take the sort of extremist version of that. It's like I kind of, to an extent, don't even believe that. I think it's all a fucking script, essentially. Until you have an open source, like clear to see voting system, I don't trust that the voting system is even real. It's like you have certain people going, I'm voting for this guy, certain people, but maybe it was going to be Biden, then Trump, then whoever next the whole time anyway, and that's been planned for the last fucking 20 years, and they're all friends, and the war in Ukraine is a deal, do whatever. Like I don't know. I just don't believe it. There's and the perfect example is the fucking Epstein thing. It's like both sides are like, oh, this is a terrible, horrible thing, but nobody's releasing the list. Nobody's fucking doing it.
Yeah, and I think like stuff like that. I mean, gosh, wasn't it Margaret Thatcher's Parliament had some issue with like child sexual abuse as well? Wasn't that like a bit? I might be totally.
At the moment, there's a huge scandal at the moment, but it's mostly to do with immigration. But
I know. Like about
there's inquiries to grooming gangs and stuff like that.
But I think
and the BBC is fucking rife with that kind of thing. It's ingrained in all areas, and this is again why I'm sort of disillusioned. It's like I think everybody's captured. I think you can't get to a certain level in media and politics and all these things without being captured.
I think Chomsky would definitely agree with you on that one. And I think very much like there is a selection, as someone who's worked in media as crew again, but like there definitely is a selection bias. You are going to move up if the producer who's, in charge of you likes you. That's how you're going to move up and get better and better positions. And there is a certain thing where like, I think the people in those roles believe what they're saying, but they're also selected to be in those roles because they believe what they're saying.
Yeah, there's layers to it.
So I definitely agree with that. But I think that in general, like if we want, for the most part, I think I just try and push back against disillusionment in general, because I think that when you end up at the part of like, well, this is where we are, there's no path forward. Yeah, I think you do run into the place of like, there's no point in making the world better. All we should try and do
is as bad.
Yeah, and all we should try and
and solipsism are not the fucking solution.
Exactly. And I think that's the problem that it gets to, where it's like, rather than like organize or try and change some of these systems, because I agree there are flaws in the systems, of course, but I think there are methods within the systems to correct those flaws. I just think most people don't want to like make it work. I think most people don't want to actually take the time to go out and organize, take the time to door knock and try and convince people that your way is right. And I think that there are people who do that, and those people end up being very powerful people. I think as much as people are starting to turn on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in a certain way, I think she very much is an example of someone who can, by pushing something that's not common in Congress, has captured the hearts and minds of a lot of people, and she's convinced a lot of people. And I think that like working within a system like that and trying to elevate dissonant voices to try and bring about change is just going to be better than sitting at the fact of like, well, it's all the same, so let's just completely, pull out of the system, because then you just end up with, you're going to cede the system to those people. You're not going to fight for it. And I think when we see this rise in right-wing populism, that's where it's coming from, because the right-wing populists are getting riled up by their base, saying we need to do elections, we need to take over, and then we can put our person in charge, and we're going to be in charge forever and make it work. And the left-wing are going, well, I don't see our change ever happening, so I'm just going to completely disengage. And I think that's the real problem you're running into, is on one side, hope, and on the other side, just complete and utter despair that any change could ever happen.
Again, I think as well, it's an issue of there's too many people under one system, and you can't ever make, there should be a way for those people to collectivize within themselves and go, okay, well, us 10 people want things to be like this over here, and you guys want it to be like that over here, so let's just agree to go and do that. Yeah.
And I think in America, at least, we have a sort of system like that, where like,
because you have the state system,
and we have and even county systems. So like, there are laws in certain counties that aren't in other counties, and so basically, like, federal laws are very broad, and then you can get as specific as like, you're not allowed outside after 10 p.m. or something in a county. We used to have curfews, sundown towns, which were only selectively enforced against black people. But hey,
right, nice.
But even then, like, as stupid as it is, it's like, yeah, you can be a racist county, and you can be a county that likes black people, and hey, we'll fast forward 100 years and see which county's doing better. Like, I think that in a number of ways there are ways to organize within that type of a system. I just think that, again, the internet makes things so easy and so readily available that the idea of touching grass, the idea of actually going out and doing the work to build those communities is prohibitive for a lot of people. It's far too much work to be worth it. And in a number of ways, I think that's sad, because I think America, especially, we had times where there were groups of people going out west, forming their own communities. We've had a ton of cults. We've had a ton of random ass people forming these like
some
little
good,
enclaves.
some bad.
Yeah, most bad, but sure. Some good, but most bad. But like, in a way, I think that's cool. I think it's cool to have a system that allows for those types of enclaves. I just think that now people don't want to engage in that as much, because again, it's easy, going to the city, getting a job in finance, whatever, and then paying your rent and going out to drink and going out to dinner once a month and having your 2.3 kids. Like, I think that's really easy. And there's so many paths to make that easy within society that it is the inertia you have to overcome to convince 9 other people who completely agree with you to go out into the woods and try something is just really, really hard.
I get conspiratorial minded with that. I think that there's two paths that the modern person goes down. It's either comfort, in which you are plied with things like money and status and luxury and the ability to consume, right? Or you're in survival mode, in which you are just fighting to scrape by for whatever the fuck you can get. But then what happens is the people in survival mode look at the people in comfort and are like, fuck you, whatever. And then the people in comfort look at the people in survival mode and they're like, well, they're ruining my environment. And then they're fighting each other rather than looking up.
No, I agree. It's a huge problem. I think social media feeds into that. The idea of like I grew up, my family was actually like fairly wealthy, but I grew up thinking we were like working class or poor. And the only reason I thought that was because I was wealthy. I was surrounded by other wealthy kids, and they happened to be wealthier than me. And it wasn't until I went to college and actually met like actual working class people that I was like, oh my God, I was so fortunate growing up. So like, I think that's a real problem. I think what you're saying is actually very much the nail on the head. I think
hedonic adaptation as well.
Yeah. And then the problem is too, these people who are like, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps when they like, inherited money or whatever. To them, they feel like they did, because they look around and see other people who were just appointed CEO of daddy's company. And they're like, well, that didn't happen. My daddy only gave me money to make my own company. It was way harder.
Yeah.
That, I think, is a huge problem.
That whole
right
bootstraps thing is a really funny, ironic phrase to me, because I think the original context is that it's not possible to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but then it started being used by the other context, and it's only used by people that they are just so out of touch.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, and it's a huge problem, and I think social media feeds into that, because now it's like, I'm not rich. I don't have Jeff Bezos' yacht. And it's like, okay, Jeff Bezos is not like the floor for being rich, okay? You can be rich well before you hit there. Man, I remember I saw some Reddit comment, I think it was, of some guy being like, I'm not rich, and I paid like $60,000 in taxes last year. And someone did the math, and they were like, that means you made like $200,000. And the guy was like, yeah, that's about what I made, but I'm just telling you, I don't feel rich. And I'm like, no, you you see the people around you making $500,000 and you can't vacation like them, so you feel poor.
He
and
probably
it's like,
lives in like fucking Manhattan or Venice
yes,
Beach or something.
and it's a huge problem
Spending
because
15 grand a month on rent.
because then too, like, what is that guy's solution going to be? It's going to be, yeah, work harder, do extra hours, when it's like the single mom of 3 who's like, I can't do that. And I think that's a big part of the problem for sure, is that type of miscommunication, I think, leads to people proposing solutions that just don't make sense. And then when the people who are struggling propose those solutions, the people with the money go, well, how would this even help you in the first place? You don't know what you're doing. And I think it just like, it does go around in a circle like that. I think it's a real problem that we as a society are going to have to work out, because I think it's just, that's the
or
internet.
it's going to boil over.
Or it's going to boil over, one of the two. Which is still working it out.
I see the same thing. Well, I see the same thing in certain communities that I'm a part, because it's like I am a social coach, and most of the people that come to me are guys that are looking to get laid. They're looking for dates, that sort of thing. So I end up being a dating coach, and I see a lot of the incel stuff and the red pill stuff, and it's like there is a silent, well, not silent. There is a hidden. I'm not going to say majority, but it's a lot of fucking men. There is a hidden group of these guys that are just entirely on the internet and not really out in the real world at all, talking to people, that are creating these angry echo chambers where they're looking at women, and it's like haves and have-nots. It's similar to the economic thing, but for sexuality. And I'm genuinely concerned that we're going to end up with some fucking Handmaid's Tale style future if enough of these guys collectivize and end up taking power. And it's like, really, the solution is love and whatever. But and I know you've had your own experiences with that world. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. It's really funny. One thing I want to say before I get into this is, like, I made my politics video for a really specific reason. Two, actually, which is, one, after debunking Leather Apron, I had a lot of leftists in my community, which is fine. I love leftists. You are more than welcome to enjoy my content, be a part of my community. Welcome. But I'm not a leftist.
You want to scare off some of the most extreme ones by going,
no.
I was a Nazi, you know?
No, I'm fine with them being there too. But the thing I didn't want was, I didn't want to make some video where I just make an offhand comment about capitalism good, and then people to suddenly go like, what? This guy, he's been lying the whole time. So that was one thing, was I just wanted to cultivate
a broad audience and not an echo chamber.
Well, I just wanted to make people aware. I wanted to let leftists make that decision for themselves. Like, if you want to stay subscribed, totally fine. That's just not me. I'm open to it, but it's not me, and, whatever. And actually, when I made the video, in the first 6 months, it never got above 4,000 views. It got 3,000 views, and I lost, I think, net, I lost 10 subscribers, which for me, I was success. Video did exactly what it meant to do, going on back to history content. The number 2 thing was, in the wake of Trump's second election, I saw a lot of my friends posting online about how they didn't understand how it could happen. And they didn't understand how anyone could support Trump after what he'd done. And so the second thing I wanted to do was show how well-meaning people, genuinely good, well-meaning people, can end up radicalized down these really dark places. And I think what I tried to show, and what I think most people got, is that it comes mostly from a place of pain. And I think it comes from a place of having problems, not feeling as though you're getting solutions to those problems, and then you just kind of turn the hate outwards because it's more comfortable than keeping it in. And that's what these communities end up being built off of. It's built off of a bunch of men who, for one reason or another, have a really, really hard time accepting who they are, just accepting the realities of dating. Not everyone's going to like you, that kind of stuff. And then, getting stuck in those places where, in order to get out, you would have to acknowledge a certain level of responsibility that I think is just so, so painful and so difficult to overcome, because it's much harder than just sitting in there and kind of blaming externality and saying, well, if I can change society, then I don't have to change. So for me, actually, I never really had a problem dating until I went far right. I think I had my first girlfriend, not a real relationship, but in middle school, we went to the dance 2 times, really, really hot and heavy stuff. Then I dated, I had one person in high school I dated, and then college was, I think, my first real relationship. But I was going to college during the time of Tinder. I was able to hook up with people. I was having relationships. I never really had an issue with that until I started getting far right. And the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, you were about to say the problem, but I'm going to ask anyway. Do you think that it was because? So I am of the opinion that looks do matter, right? But they're nowhere near as important as people think they are. And I talked about this last time, so I'm not going to go into super deep now. I think you share an understanding with me, but the most important thing is the way that you feel about yourself. And so I'm wondering if the politics affected the way that people saw you because of the politics themselves, or because they changed the way that you saw yourself.
Oh, that's interesting. That is not the question I thought you were going to ask.
What did you think?
I mean, probably a bit of both. Oh, I thought you were going to say, I thought you were just going to stop at, do you think it was the politics? I'd never really considered
the obvious answer.
Yeah, how the politics made me view myself. So that's what I'm kind of chewing on.
Because if it made you view yourself as like an oppressed whatever, then that can come out in your behavior, and that affects the way that people see you.
I think there's probably some truth to that I hadn't really considered before. I think in a number of ways, the bigger problem was when you're in those spaces, I think a lot of times you feel crazy because you feel like I have this really obvious problem that if anyone looks at the data is so obvious what's going on and what the solution is, which is just happens to be my solution. Funny how that works out.
Of course.
And then I want to share this with people, but every time I do, people say, I don't know if I agree with you. And I go, oh, well, you just need to clearly look at more data and then you will agree with me. And then you kind of get into that space of like, you're bringing it up a lot, you're talking about it a lot. And I think that's off-putting to people. It's interesting though, because when you say how I viewed myself, I think too, I lost a lot of confidence because I think I was sort of like a weird kid, whatever, but like I was a theater kid. I had a lot of confidence mostly just because I didn't care what people thought of me in a number of ways. And then
you accepted yourself as you are,
exactly.
Regardless of the
there were things I didn't like about myself, but I was just like, that's who I am, so who cares? And so to that extent, I was fine.
Which is the right attitude.
Yes. And so it was fine to like put myself out there like that. But then when I got into these spaces more, it became like, ooh, you know what? It's true. I don't really have a good jaw. In fact, I grew this beard because I had not like a double chin, but like I just don't have a clearly defined chin. So, I need to cover it up. And also my hair isn't really good and my shoulders are broad, but my man boobs are too big. Like suddenly I'm judging myself on this very strict physical level where it's basically like I'm not a supermodel. And so then I think you're right. Yeah, when I was on these dates with women, probably that lack of confidence would come out because there probably was a bit more approval-seeking activity of just saying like, oh, I'm saying this, but haha, that's funny, right? You're okay with that, right? And I think that's always a bit of a turn off.
Yeah, of course. That's the fucked up thing with the incels and the black pill and stuff like that. It's not your looks that are fucking you up. It's your hyper focus on them and belief that they are wrong. If you're like, oh, there is something wrong with me, everything you do is going to have a hint of there's something wrong with me, and people pick up on that. So it's like a subconscious communication thing that happens.
I will also say for the incels listening to this who are getting mad right now, your looks definitely do matter in like a first pass thing. Because probably what everyone's going to say 100%. Is no one's dating a burn victim, blah, blah, blah. First off, people are dating burn victims, just for the record. But like looks matter on dating apps for like a very first pass surface level thing. But dating apps are not the only place to meet people. And there are plenty of places where you can meet people, sort of become friends and progress to a relationship. You have to go out and find them. They're not online because online the looks are going to be a big thing, of course. But it's like that's just a single screen. And you can even get past that screen as long as you're not specifically looking at the lowest effort way to meet people, which is dating apps, which is, again, it's incredibly low effort. So just for the incels listening, I wanted to throw in that little thing. But I agree with you for the most part that looks don't matter when it comes to actually forming connections, actually forming relationships, and whether or not you like someone. Because my wife is going to be old at some point. She's going to have wrinkles. And I'm not sitting here being like, all right, look, when she hits 40, I better trade this in because I just...
DiCaprio.
Yeah, I just, you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah, it's that whole thing that at the end of the day, we are all here because two people fucked.
Yes.
And most people are objectively a little bit unattractive, in my opinion. It's like 80% of people are not what you would consider like attractive people, right? Why are they all here,
And it's presentation. Like my hair, I don't look as attractive with long hair. I think I had some photos on my politics video of me with shorter hair. And I clean up good. I look real attractive when I'm skinny with short hair. But I got married, I grew my hair out, I gained a little weight, and it's like, but people still talk to me. I still have like great interactions. Obviously, I'm not dating anymore, but it's like people still like me for me because at the end of the day, my looks were never the thing that drew people to me.
Yeah. That's the ironic thing as well. It's like when I am my most cleaned up and trimmed and stuff. Like every time I get a haircut, my girlfriend's like, "Oh, I don't like the." But when I haven't washed my hair in a week and I'm all fucking greasy and matted and all over the place and I haven't shaved and I've got this like patchy beard growing in, she's like, "Oh my god, you're so sexy." It's like, what the fuck is going on there? So the things that we think are attractive are totally not. They want a slightly homeless looking caveman. A lot of them, you know.
Well, but also because this is the other thing. I think so many incels and I don't know if you run into this in your work, but a lot of times people talk about one-itis. There's some woman that you're attracted to, and that's it. And I think
that's
a lot
like
of times
pick up terminology, but
yeah. And what a lot of people think about is I need to be the ideal man to get this woman, but that woman's ideal is not necessarily this generic ideal. So when you're looking at these things of like women like guys who do this, women like guys who do that, if your goal is to go out to the club and hit on 80 women and go home with one of them, follow that advice, you are guaranteed to be successful. But if you're trying to form a relationship with one person, well, you probably should figure out whether or not they're into you and learn to accept rejection. But putting that to the side, really what you want to focus on is becoming that person's ideal, which might be the homeless caveman. It might be the bodybuilder. It might be any number of things. And in that way, I think it's more about finding people who like you for you and fit with you as you are comfortable, rather than thinking all women only like Giga Chad and there's no other type.
Yeah. Because the way that you behave will inform the kind of people that you attract and meet as well. So. And it's that difference between, this is one of the primary things I teach, is the difference between value and compatibility. If you're the kind of guy that believes that women want status and looks and money and, you know, fast cars and whatever the fuck else, and you start cultivating those things, you are going to attract those kinds of women, which then informs that worldview. But that's why you get all the pickup guys and the red pill guys and the rich fucking dudes that live in Miami and date OnlyFans models, right? And they're like, all women are whores and they cheat on me. And it's like, of course, if you're attracting that kind of women, they're gonna leave you as soon as somebody else comes along with a faster car and more money and a bigger dick. But if you're looking for compatibility and you're instead going, who am I? What do I want? Right? Who am I? What do I want? And then go out and find the people that, it's like, first of all, who am I and how can I display that in the most authentic way possible, right? And in a way that is self-loving, and even if you have flaws and whatever, displaying your vulnerability in a way that is like, I am okay with the totality of my being, right? And that just at being a human being, I am worthy of love and affection and connection, not looking at things in terms of a hierarchical scale, but as a spectrum. And then you can go out and you go, what do I want from a person? And how do I find the people that have the qualities that I want and like the qualities that I have? And then you have compatibility. And it's a numbers game at that point. It's like you refine who you are and what you want, and then you find the people that are the other side of that puzzle, and they always exist because there's every kind of person out there. But the mistake that these guys make is they just sit on the fucking internet and they look at like, oh, my canthal tilt is not, you know, the perfect degree, and my jawline's not masculine enough, and I have fucked up teeth that aren't perfectly straight and white because I smoke too much and drink coffee. And then they go, well, and then they go on fucking Tinder and they don't get any matches. And it's like, well, I must not be worthy of love. And all women want is, and so now I am the black pill because I am genetically not good enough. And then they just spiral. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It makes the problem worse because you believe that you're not good enough and therefore you're not. You are what you believe you are, and people will treat you as you expect them to treat you. So if you don't believe that you're worthy of love and attention and affection, you're never going to get it. And I have seen even attractive, like physically attractive men 100%. Fall into this trap. I've seen physically attractive guys that are nervous and weird and needy and don't get any attention from women, but because of their mentality. And I've seen objectively disgusting looking men. Sorry, guys, but it's true. I've had clients that are like really fucking ugly. And they do great, and they date like really attractive women because they like their personality, because they like who they are on the inside, and they connect on that internal thing rather than the external thing. And I said this last week, and I've said this before, but it's there are people. Sorry, the majority of women who I've spoken to and who are polled on this. And again, I think this is like a masculinity femininity thing. I think feminine men will feel this way, and masculine women won't. But let's say it's 19 out of 20. they're not saying, oh, there's not enough attractive guys, there's not enough good looking guys. They're saying there's not enough guys who are emotionally competent and have their shit together and able to talk to me and able to emotionally communicate without either being like needy and overbearing or just shutting down and only expressing anger. Because that's like one of the things that we learn is the only masculine expression of emotion is anger.
Yeah.
And then what they're
Very
saying
much
is
so.
that if they have come across men that they think are physically unattractive, and then they get to know them and they like their personality, and then they find them physically attractive afterwards. The way that they perceive them visually changes based on their personality. Yeah, that's my rant over.
No, and I agree with you. And I think, like, if I can add my own little rant there, I think that in a number of ways, the red pill space, one of the things that's weird for me is it always feels like dating for other men. Like you are dating to get a woman that looks good on your arm, not necessarily to find a good partner. And at the same time, they're these very like conservative guys. But as someone who like, I grew up very much in the church. Like my wife is like, and I still attend church regularly. Like we're in a traditional conservative view, the woman helps you build your empire. Like you and the woman are working together. It is not like the woman takes care of the house, you go out, do the thing, and then come home and say, wife, have my slippers and martini ready. It's not Mad Men. And I think that like, that's the other thing is like the types of women I think that you seek for in these red pill spaces are these kind of vapid women so that you can show them off to other men. Whereas I think the type of woman you're going to be most happy with is one who's going to help you project your values out in the world. Kind of like what you're saying, like someone who mirrors your values, helps you build a family, helps you build, or whatever you want, but like helps you build those values out into the world. That type of relationship is going to be far more rewarding and far harder to find than just like, you know, some girl with fake boobs who's at the club that night.
Yeah, there's a million fucking attractive women on Instagram.
Yes,
how many of them are wife material?
Exactly.
That's a really interesting point though, because like I myself, I'm a fairly vain person. I like very, I only really date women that I find quite attractive, and I will lower my standards if it's just for a casual relationship or whatever. But I am realizing as I get older, so because I look around as well, and I'm like I'm scared that as I get older, I'm going to look worse, and then I look at my partner, I'm like, well, as she gets older, obviously there's going to be wrinkles and saggy tits and all of this sort of stuff, but that happens to everybody, right? But I'm looking at this woman, and I'm thinking, that's my values as I get older are changing, and I was really scared that wasn't going to be the case when I was younger. I'm 28 now, or I'm going to turn 29 in a few months. And maybe even just 3 or 4 years ago, I was really scared that I'd need to wait till I was 40 and then say, oh, the 20-year-old and stuff. And I think it's sort of a juvenile perspective, and that as you mature as a man, especially, I don't know what it's like from a woman's perspective, but as you mature as a man, your desires in terms of how much you're basing things on looks and how much you're basing things on the actual internal stuff changes as well, which is very, very comforting and not something that I see a lot of guys or a lot of people in general talking about. It's like I've had this question in my mind for close to a decade now. It's like, as I get older, will I be more attracted to older, less attractive women? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And that's good. That's really comforting. And so I'm at this point in my life where it's like, yeah, I still only want to date attractive women, but I'm also realizing that as I get older and as people get older and as the looks fade, I'm still going to be happy and in love and all of those things, which is, as I say, very comforting.
And your definition of attractive is going to change as well. Like for me, certainly when I was younger, like in college, yeah, the hot girls were 18 to 20. And now that I'm older, I'm like, you know what? I actually like a bit more of a mature, like 35 to like 27-year-old girl. Like actually a woman with a little bit of experience, a little bit of wrinkle in the skin, like that does it for me. Whereas back in the day, it was like, no, I need like freshly 18 because I was freshly 18. And I think that that's something that's difficult to come to terms with when so much of what's pushed as beauty is that kind of youthfulness. And I think that sometimes as a guy, you are going to have those fears of like, I'm only ever going to be attracted to like 18 to 25-year-old women. But just like you're saying, when you get older, you start realizing there's more than just looks, and even the types of looks you're into change. You know?
Yeah, I think it is partly a juvenile perspective, because it's like you look at the guys who I would, even if they're older, I would classify as immature, which are the guys that are going after the status and the value and stuff. And there's nothing wrong with wanting those things as a man, because I think as a man you want to, or as a masculine person, let's say, you want to have some sort of capability to take care. Like I feel very, very, very driven to take care of the people around me,
Yes.
right? And it's like sometimes I'm not able of doing that, and it makes me feel less of a man. It's like my girlfriend at the moment. It's like I'm very, we're crossing the road. I'm fucking looking around. I'm always standing on the side. I'm holding doors, and it's like all of that stuff is just built into my psyche, and I don't know if that's a societal thing, but I don't think it is. I think it's partly just like I am driven to protect and take care of, right? In a physical sense, whereas for her it's more of in an emotional way.
Yeah.
I lost my train of thought. What were we just, oh yeah, and I think when I see guys like fucking Andrew Tate and stuff like that, and they're just like, oh yeah, I fuck all these, and it's like the women are fake anyway, but it's like they're dating all of these women and driving the fast cars, and it's like it's fine to want fast cars and beautiful women, but there is a line where it crosses into just performative at that point, and you're not even doing it for you or for your life satisfaction. You're doing it for the status that it brings, and for the vision of other immature people that are like, oh well, that's the peak of masculinity right there. It's not. It's the peak of boyhood. Is those things.
Yeah, and what I find like really sinister about kind of the Tate sort of ideology thing is like there's a way in which what Andrew Tate is saying actually is 100% right. If you want to have sex, get a bunch of money, work out a bunch, get up your Instagram clout, and you can go to the club, hit on 300 women, and take one home. That is 100% true. That will 100% work. And I think there's a lot of men who go to him because they're lonely for romantic connection, and he teaches them how to get sexual connection. And sexual connection can turn into romantic connection, but it often doesn't. And I think the real insidious thing is if you're a young man buying into that, you're going to feel like your problem has been solved, because on some level, if you've never had sex before and you start having sex, you're going to feel, oh, there's a connection. I'm being accepted. I'm being validated. This is romantic love. And you're going to continue to do that for years and years until suddenly you turn around, you realize that you have never been able to get that romantic love. And you've wasted a lot of time, and it's somewhat late now, because a lot of those good women do marry off at younger ages. Like a lot of the like women who are great personality-wise, who are good fits for you, are going to be taken by the other guys who look like you sooner, because they weren't as concerned with going after like, the hottest people, and they were concerned with being themselves. And that for me, I think, is like the real nasty part of the Tate stuff, is that the men he's teaching right now aren't going to realize the problems that they're going to encounter until later in life, and they're going to develop these nasty habits that they're then going to have to work their way back out of.
I sit somewhere in the middle on that. So I think first of all that there is, I can't remember who said this, but I think it's some woman in this space that's like a female dating coach. I can't remember her name, but she said that women will need connection in order, most women need connection in order to have sex, whereas most men use sex in order to feel connection. And I agree with that to an extent. And I think that's just sort of like, I'm a very physical person. Most of the way that I express affection is through physicality as well. And different people have different love languages, etc. But I've noticed that the women that are healthiest, in my opinion, of all the women that I've dated, like the ones that are most emotionally healthy are the ones that want to wait a little bit before having sex, and they're like, no, let's have a couple of days first. I need to get to know you better, because it's far more of an emotional experience for them to have sex. Whereas for me, it's like there's a difference in the physicality as well. It's like the male parts are external. There's like a spiritual thing to it that is different between the genders. I believe between the sexes. But I still think that as a man or as a woman, you can go about healthy, casual dating. And I've heard it said before that, the more partners you have, the more difficult it is for you to love someone. And that's a statistic that's often thrown around. And it's usually thrown around by men in the manosphere, saying that the more partners a woman has, the worse it is. And I think that applies to both parties. But I think it applies for different reasons. I don't think it is the actual sleeping around that causes that. I think one of two things happens. Either you are doing it because you are inherently unhealthy to begin with, and you're using sex as like a form of mental escapism or to feed a certain need in an unhealthy way or whatever, and you're just the kind of person that is not really capable of commitment. And I used to be that guy. It's like I speak from experience in that I used to do that. I used to seek out sex just specifically to fill a need within myself, but I was terrified of any form of commitment. But I think it is also possible, and in fact healthy, when you are young, to have some experience and to date in a honest, upfront but non-committal way, at least for a few years, so that you can learn what you like, what you don't like.
Sure.
You know, to figure out who you are and what you want, to be able to handle conflicts and things like that in relationships. Because like all the best casual relationships I've had have been ones where there is a bit of an emotional connection, but there is some sort of deal breaker. So it's like you're really into each other and you connect on an emotional level, but you realize that there is something that excludes you from being long-term partners, and that again comes from experience of knowing what you like and what you don't and what works for you, and solving conflict in the same way is a huge one. And then they always end in one of three ways. It's like, and the most common one is the feelings just sort of fizzle out and then you just stop hooking up after a while. Yeah. The second most common one is the feelings don't fizzle out, but you just get sick of each other and the problems arise and they become too much and you go, we have to break up, and it kind of hurts, but you realize it's for the best. Yeah. And then the least common one is you end up in a relationship. And I think the mistake that a lot of people make is because they're not capable of getting their needs met in a healthy way, their physical needs, their emotional needs, without a commitment, what they end up doing is committing to things that would normally fit into one of those first two categories, that aren't good for them, and then they become serial monogamous, and they themselves miss out on the healthy, good relationships because they're not looking for them, because they're stuck in like a 2-year fucking thing that isn't good for either person, that they're just staying in because they're getting easy access to sex and intimacy. And again, this applies to men and women.
And I'd also say that's like the same thing, where it's the problem of dating for other men, right? Like, why are you in the relationship? Because you're supposed to be in a relationship, right? And it's like, that's what you fall into.
I think it's less about that and more that people just have needs, right? And if they don't know where they can get those needs met, they're going to take the first person that comes along. And so, and I don't know, maybe in the US it's a bit different, but where I grew up in the UK, it's like most people's relationships started with a hookup. It's like they got a little bit drunk somewhere, hooked up with somebody, and then they spent a couple of days over, and then suddenly they're boyfriend, girlfriend, and then it just keeps going because that's just how it happened. And it's entirely based on just endorphins and feelings and sexual chemistry and that sort of stuff. And then it fades out, but then they end up stuck in that 2-year relationship because neither one of them is feeling like they have any other options. And again, that's like a self-worth thing, a self-love thing, which I really believe that most people experience. I think that most people aren't confident enough, don't love themselves enough, have social fears, have all of this stuff. And so they end up trapped in these shitty relationships. And I think there's a middle ground to be found where you should be trying to experiment as much as possible early on and like deliberately being non-committal because you don't know what it means to have a relationship yet and how to solve these things. It's like everybody's going to make their own mistakes, right? But then trying to get to a point where you know what you want, you know how to get it, and then the third step is just finding that thing, and that's honestly the hardest part. That can take years, right? Yes. And then you have the other problems there. It's like the grass is greener on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it, but you have to start with fertile soil first. But again, that's knowing what you want, because it reduces the paradox of choice. Whereas if you feel you have infinite options, you're going to feel dissatisfied with any of the options that you have. I sort of realized that there is no better option. You end up finding a person, you're like, this person fits so well with what I want that it would be crazy of me to give that up and try and look for something better, because there probably isn't something better out there, you know?
That's interesting. Yeah, I have to sit with it a bit more, but you brought up a lot of stuff I hadn't thought about. You might have changed my mind on that, but I always sit with stuff a bit more these days. Yeah, because for me, like, I was, and maybe this just comes from like my more religious background, but I was very serially monogamous, but that was like intentional, because for me it was like I preferred that. Like, the few casual relationships I had were like, I couldn't get into a committed relationship and I'd need sex, and then I'd get sex, and immediately afterwards I'd be like, oh, I don't like this person. But the whole time I'd be lying to myself that I did, because
or not even lying to yourself, just being convinced by your own horniness. Yeah, you're like, this person's the best person ever, and then you have sex and you're like, oh my God, what have I done?
Like, but that is an interesting point, because I think you're right. Like, I had to figure out what I liked in my own kind of way, which was a little bit of a different path, but like what you're describing makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting. I'd have to sit with that a bit more.
I think the alternative, because I have met people that were high school sweethearts that like got together when they were 14, 15,
That's
16,
luck, though,
and are now in their 30s or 40s and are like that. Well, I think it's partly luck. And it's partly that they were young enough that they could develop together. Because I think part of the issue as well is people develop independently, and relationships do require people to mold themselves to each other. And you have two choices. You can either make some sacrifices and mold yourself to each other, or you can become heavily refined and then find a person that fits you perfectly. This option's so much harder.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it exists somewhere in the middle. Like, so you don't want to sacrifice too much because you want to be happy. Right. And you don't want to feel like you are giving things up. But it's like every relationship has some sort of thing where you're like, okay, this is what I thought I wanted, but this person is so good for me that I am going to give up that thing and be happy doing that because I realize that the trade-off is worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a pretty good point, honestly.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree that those people are mostly lucky, but it is also a molding thing. It's like they got lucky to be, it's like they weren't, there's refinement and there's compatibility. And so you can either have high refinement, high compatibility, or low refinement and build the compatibility and the refinement together, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
But there's always going to have to be some sort of initial thing that allows you to be together, and the direction needs to be the same and everything.
No, I mean, my wife and I, because it's interesting, my wife and I have, I think in many ways, like a very good relationship because we don't fight. I think we've been together close to 5 years. I think we've had less than 10 fights in that time.
That's amazing.
And a lot of what we do is like, we will have disagreements, but what happens is when we can sense it turning into a fight, we're able to stop and be like, hey, like I'm someone who needs to solve everything immediately. I just am like, let's solve this immediately. And she needs space to process. And so we got to the point where she'd have to say, hey, I need space. And then for my needs, I'd say, okay, but we need to set a time, like tomorrow or the day after or something. But like, we know we're going to come back to this. And sometimes we'd go before then or something. But like, in a way, a lot of what we had to do to get to that place was that kind of compromise and that kind of like, even though I think were already fairly formed, because when we met, I was 27 and she was 24. So, and it was like right before both of our birthdays. So, like we've been together for a while and I think we had to learn that how, like I'm messy, she's very neat. And so I had to learn, like I had to tell her like, look, you need to tell me when things are dirty and then not clean it up because I'm not going to see that things are dirty unless you like tell me. Because to me, I look at something and it's just not dirty. It's fine. Yeah. So
just
it's like
filth wizard.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like that. I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying, that like a big part of those good kind of long-term relationships involves you changing, not even in the sense of like you have to give up part of yourself or something, but just in the sense of like there's another human.
The compatibility, you need to find a way to work together and figure out if you can, because it's like there are compromises. There are compromises that are like, oh, this is really not a big deal, I can just learn to do this. 100%. And there are compromises that are like, this goes against the core of who I am as a person.
Yes, 100%.
It's like I've had conversations, I am a primarily physical person with how I display affection, right? But I'm not always touchy-feely. Sometimes I want some space. And so I've had conversation with my girlfriend before. She's like, well, you're not touching me, and so I need you to verbalize that you like this. And then she said, well, if you don't want to do it, then it means that you don't mean it, right? And I had to explain. It's like, well, no, because this is like, I want you to feel loved, right? I want you to feel love and affection. It doesn't come naturally to me to just verbalize it and give you physical compliments, right? But if you tell me that that's how you're going to feel affection from me, then I'm going to learn how to do it. And over the past few weeks, I've got better at just giving, and it's become like a thing for me. But it's like, that's just what happens in relationships. You learn the needs and wants of each other. And it's like, even if that thing doesn't come naturally to you, it doesn't mean that you don't want to do it. And compatibility as well. So I think that whether it be a friendship or a casual relationship or a working thing or a marriage, the three things that make a relationship are chemistry, compatibility, and connection. Connection is built over time, and it's on shared emotional experiences and understanding of each other's needs and wants and feelings about things. Like if I know how you think and feel about things, and especially feel, and vice versa, we're going to feel bonded in some way. So that's the connection part. Sure. The chemistry is the ineffable bit. It's like the physical attraction, the often literally chemistry. It's a pheromonal thing. But the compatibility thing is the most important. But it's like compatibility just means the degree to which two things can work together without conflict, right? So it doesn't mean that you have to be the same. It doesn't mean you have to like the same things. It means that you need to be able to have harmony in your personality and your likes and your dislikes and your goals and things like that, and direction. And one of the most, I'd say the two most important areas of compatibility is, what do you want Like, what do you want? What do you want from life? What do you want from the future? Like, how do you see things going, and how do you solve conflict?
Yes.
Because if you solve conflict
Completely
in
agree.
different ways and that can't be resolved, the relationship is fucked.
Yeah.
Because then you just end up breeding resentment. It's like, even if it starts out great, and if you don't, like, even if everything else is perfect, if you don't resolve conflict in the same way, it's just going to leave lingering little things
Yes.
that build up, and then you just hate each other after a while.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah, I'm honestly surprised you're 28. Yeah. And not that I'm that much older than you, but yeah, that's all pretty true. Yeah.
I started young.
Yeah, that's true. It is true. I do think there's a certain thing for, like, you can start putting in the work at any age, and there are 60-year-old men who've never put in the work, and they still scream at their wife for, you know, go fishing for a long weekend or something. And there's probably guys who are like 19 who have been putting in the work for years, and they're just
have their
already
head
pretty
screwed
good.
on straight. Yeah, I used to have this conversation with people a lot, because I used to get a lot more of that. Aren't you a bit young to be teaching this stuff? The kind of thing.
Sure.
I don't feel that way anymore. I used to have a lot of imposter syndrome, but it's like I've been working as a coach for 5 or 6 years. All of my clients get good fucking. I know what I'm talking about, basically, and I'm very confident in that regard. But I never used to be when I first started, and I was a lot younger as well. But the rationalization that I used to make was, it's like, if I was 25 and I told people that I had been really obsessed with oil painting since I was 14, and now I teach it, they'd be like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. But because it's like quote unquote life coaching, I hate that term, because it implies like snake oil salesman and bullshit. And especially in the dating niche, there is so much just nonsense and pickup shit and but just like really insecure. And again, and most of the guys don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They're just repeating advice that they've heard that worked one time. Anyway, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I used to rationalize it. It's like, well, you know, I got into this stuff when I was 14. It's been, at that point, it's now been 14 years. At that point, it was like 11 years, and it's like, I think, you know, I have the experience. I'm more experienced than most men. My clients get good results. I've been teaching this for a couple of years. I think I know what I'm doing at this point. And then the thing dropped. But I noticed as well, when I stopped feeling insecure about my own capability and like, what's the word that I'm looking for? Deservedness to be, experience level, whatever. Other people stopped questioning me on it. And now it's like, I have conversations with people that are like 45, 50, and I give them advice, and the advice speaks for itself. They're like, oh, you clearly know what you're talking about. So, there you go. Yeah, it's
interesting. I think because I also got the technical director, like my day job, like that normally is something done by 40 or 50-year-old guys. And just because I started in digital, which did not have a lot of money when I got into it, so they wanted to hire me because they could do so cheaply, I would end up on bigger projects being in charge of like 30, 40-year-old guys, and I would run into a similar thing. And much like you're saying, and much to the grander point we're talking about with dating, the moment you just accept, you're right, I am a little young, and that doesn't matter. I can still do this job. Other people pick up on that, and then other people are not going to question you as much.
Yeah, it's the same with everything. It really, there is some, I think the world is like a mirror. And especially when it comes to social situations, people are, there's every kind of person. There's every kind of person, every kind of belief system, every kind of everything. And you will filter based on how you express. And so if you believe a certain thing about yourself, the world is going to affirm that in the people that you meet and their opinions of you, not just because you're going to filter in those kinds of people, but because the way that you behave comes across subconsciously and informs their behavior towards you. And so when you're talking about like confidence and self-worth and imposter syndrome and all of this stuff, it really is just about personal belief. And I've experienced this throughout my whole life. It's like, however I feel about myself is how people treat me. And that informs most of what I teach to other people as well. But it's so difficult to get past some of, like, the best clients that I get are the ones that are starting fresh, who haven't got the pickup mentality, who haven't got that. Because it's like, once the insecurity and stuff is built in, it becomes really, really difficult to deprogram, because they are having experiences that affirm that worldview, but they're looking at it as if it's an objective thing rather than a subjective. So they're going, I have these experiences, which means that I'm right. And it's like, no, you have those experiences because you believe that you're going to have those experiences. It's like, you're not wrong. You're just seeing a small part of a bigger picture. And you need to be able to see the whole picture to decide what you actually want.
And honestly, even with like my own experience with like right-wing stuff, that is true too. Like, man, something in the video that I wasn't expecting so many people to get wrong was the time of everything. Because I like stopped denying the Holocaust in like 2017, 2018. Sorry, but I guess listeners probably haven't watched the video. Yeah, at one point I was a Holocaust denier. That was about as far right as I ever went. But about as far right as I went. It's probably one of the furthest ones you can go to. But anyway, point being, the when you get into those spaces, I think when you start trying to get out of those spaces, one of the things you find is that your way of thinking is a little poisoned. Where anytime you see an ad featuring an interracial couple, boom, that's an ad with an interracial couple. Like just immediately you're like seeing it. There's even like terms in the community for like you're noticing. Like these things, I think
really you're filtering.
Yes. And I think in the same way that you're saying with the dating stuff, like if you get into these communities, the difficult part of getting yourself out is that you are like trained to think in a certain way. I think that's a lot of these spaces that go after young men, because I think in a number of ways, that's the easiest way to do it. Because if you can get people into a thought pattern, they're going to start reinforcing it themselves. They're going to teach other people that thought pattern, and like everything's going to start to move in that direction. And they're going to feel justified because in the same way that you're saying, they'll go, this isn't subjective, this is objective. To them, it's like they can point to all these various things when what they're not noticing is all the things they're missing. Yeah. Because much like what you're doing, I would love to speak to young men more, because I really just don't think enough people are talking to them right now. And it's like, as someone who is down there, like, I don't know. There's a part of me that feels like I can identify, I can relate, I can speak in a way they hear, because I've been in those spaces and I understand the way you think when you're in those spaces. So it's something I'd like to get to eventually. I really want to do a video called How to Be a Man, Real Working 2025 No Virus. That's what I really want to do.
I think that's good. I think I really think the part of the issue is and especially just talking specifically about the dating niche,
sure.
It's like the guys that have it figured out aren't thinking about it as a problem.
Yes.
So all of the advice is coming from people that started not knowing what the fuck they're doing, and then it has created this sort of echo chamber of bad advice, and then that's the only available thing, because the healthy guys aren't talking about it because they're not seeing it as a thing to talk about, or they realize there's some stigma there and they just don't want to be associated with that world. And so it's very, very, very difficult to find advice for young men that's actually good.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Well, see, this is the part where I get nervous, because you definitely know more about this than me. So whenever I start talking, like, usually if I'm talking, you're asking me about Rome, I'm like, all right, shut up, I'm going to correct you. But anytime I hear you say something like suspicious, I'm like, I'm probably wrong. I should listen to this guy. But I think I agree with everything you just said, but I also think it comes from a place of like, the way you give advice when you're successful is different. Like, just be yourself is actually correct. That is 100% the correct advice. It's just
it's just not nuanced enough.
Exactly. And then the framing of like, be yourself. And
if you don't
understand
know what the fuck that means, it's awful advice.
And then it's also like, understand not everyone's going to like you. Like, because it's like, again, if you're on the one-itis, if you only want Sally from, chemistry class or something, maybe Sally doesn't like yourself. And then you think, oh, well, what I should do is I should be a different person, rather than, hey, Jane from math class is also kind of cute. Sorry, maths class. Sorry. But it's like, that's the stuff to me where I think like the good advice is there, but the problem is the messaging. The problem is like how you express it, because just so many young men. And then the tough thing too is that like the good work, the stuff to do is hard. It like getting to know who you are, accepting your flaws, developing a system of values,
social fear.
Yes. And then projecting your values out into the world in a way that other people can reject or accept is like such a vulnerable, difficult thing to do. And I think it's like,
and you have to experience a lot of rejection to it. It's like anything. The hardest bit is the first little,
and it's just tough because again, then you have like Andrew Tate giving candy, where it's just like, work out, don't think about anything, do these very physical, like, not that working out and getting a good body is easy, but just in the sense of like, it's not as much like mental effort.
It's easier than confronting your demons.
Exactly. And then it's like,
and that's the thing about the pickup stuff that makes it so fucking attractive. It's like, it preys on insecurity, because it's going, yes, you are not good enough, but you can pretend to be. And so instead of actually fixing the issues, and especially as a man, like, it's very difficult to be vulnerable, because a lot of us grow up believing correctly that vulnerability is emotional vulnerability is a feminine quality.
Yes.
But it is also the quality of a healthy masculine man, right? Yes. As long as you're doing it properly. And the mistake that a lot of guys make is they think that, oh, well, I had my first girlfriend and I had all this repressed shit, and then I let that all out with her, and then she left me, which means that me being emotional is actually bad, and all the women that say that one emotional man is wrong. And it's like, that's a whole other thing to unpack right there, the difference between healthy and unhealthy emotional vulnerability.
Exactly.
But
Yeah, and it gets tricky
What were
too
we just
because like
talking about? Sorry.
toxic masculinity is a term that like I hate it, and I know actually like I don't like the term, but the underlying concept I think is super valid. The idea of someone like projecting masculinity to such an extent that it is having toxic effects makes sense.
Yeah,
but I think if you
it becomes toxic when it's not balanced.
exactly, but when you just say, "Oh, that's toxic masculinity" to someone, I think it's so difficult to like just accept that, and no one's on like Twitter or X or whatever.
Yeah, and
like
it
having
feels like they're
nuanced
going, "Oh, well, you can't be a
conversations.
man and stuff as
Exactly.
well."
Yeah.
What were we talking about just before that? I had a point to finish, but I forgot what it was.
Talk about dating, and you were talking about. I was talking about Andrew Tate giving
Oh yeah,
people stuff. Danger.
the reason the red pill stuff and the pickup stuff is so good.
Yeah.
Well, not so good, but so
Yeah, I get
appealing.
what you mean. Effective.
You don't have to go through all that stuff. It's just like, yeah, you're not good enough, but you can pretend to be. You can put this mask on, and then by doing that, they affirm their own belief that they're not good enough because then the mask starts to work, and they're like,
exactly.
oh well, I just pretend to be this other person. It's really really insidious.
Yeah. No, and like I said, and
it's like depression as well. I think that the majority of people with depression, and I speak to someone who used to be like really fucking depressed. I thought I was killing myself when I was a teenager and stuff. But if you, I think that it's like you have some underlying thing that is causing you to feel pain. It is much, much easier to feel a little bit bad or to have an absence of feeling for a long period of time than it is to feel really bad and go through and uncover that shit for a short period. And I think especially as a man, because we feel that like lack of vulnerability thing, it's like we can't be emotional because that means I'm not man enough. You know, I can't express myself because that's a feminine quality, which it is, but you can learn to do it in a healthy way that makes you more of a man, ironically.
Well, and that's the thing where like when women, my whole theory is that like when women joined the workforce and got more rights, they developed a lot of masculine traits, and they said, you know, we're gonna be providers, we're gonna be protectors, we're going to be like go-getters, like we're gonna develop these masculine traits. And then I think what men did is they said, oh, well, we're actually just going to do that even more then, as opposed to I think what we should have done, which is, oh, let's take some feminine traits then. Let's get more into emotional vulnerability. Let's like have these kinds of conversations and stuff. That's my, I could see, I'm interested to hear your thoughts. That's my crackpot theory, but it's always been like women got more masculine and men did not get more feminine. They chose to just like pivot to hyper masculinity.
Yeah. I think that is an angle. I think that so I think women becoming more masculine is not necessarily a good thing. I think that masculinity, like femininity, should be balanced by a bit of masculinity. Masculinity should be balanced by a bit of femininity. These things exist in both people. Yeah, it's like the taijutsu. A bit exists in either, and you need to balance those things to not become unhealthy and toxic. And I say this all the time, but and I said it in the last podcast. But fuck it, I'll say it again. The unhealthy toxic masculine is the domineering, aggressive, controlling aspect because it's not balanced by empathy and emotion and vulnerability and all of that stuff. And the unhealthy toxic feminine is the like emotionally imbalanced, like lashing out, kind of irrational, motivated by emotion thing, and that can be men as well in certain contexts, right? It's just masculine and feminine.
Sure.
Manipulation rather. It's like a woman will fuck up your woman.
I get
imbalanced feminine. Imbalanced feminine will fuck with you by targeting your social networks and making you feel like you're crazy and like manipulating you emotionally. And men do this as well. And imbalanced masculine will fuck you up by like attacking and controlling and dominating. And it's like it exists on both sides. And with the workforce and stuff like that, I wrote a post about this in my community. I've been turning it into a video because I took the forums down. I'm turning it into products and things like that. But it was because I was trying to figure out in the UK where I grew up, the number one thing that is most likely to kill you if you're a man between, I think it's 20 and 50 is yourself. Right?
Sure.
It is the number one killer of men between 20 and 50 is suicide, and 75% of suicides worldwide are men, right? And so I was like, why? And I think part of it is the vulnerability thing that we talked about. It's like there's no healthy outlet for vulnerability, especially in circles of men. It's like we need to learn how to actually be vulnerable in a healthy way and realize that it is okay to do that. And it doesn't push people away, and it's the needy expression of vulnerability that pushes people away. But then one of the other things is that society has changed, and people think of leadership as a masculine quality. I don't think that it is, right? But I don't think that every man has to be a leader, and if that were the case, it would cause a lot of fucking problems. And I think the reality of the situation is that most men just want to feel valuable, and they'd be perfectly happy being told what to do. as long as that makes them valuable. They want to feel like they are doing something that provides value to themselves and to other people and to their community. They want to feel like I have a purpose. And everybody does to an extent. But I think for men, it's like I want to provide for other people. I want to take care of other people. I want to, like, I think if you ask most masculine men, they would rather die young for something important than live a long life that they don't, like, they'd rather sacrifice themselves for something meaningful, which is why they go to war and all this sort of, it's like inbuilt into the thing. And I had a conversation with one of my female friends about this quite recently. It's like, if we're walking together in the street and some guy pulls out a knife, my instinct is to stand in front of you and take a stabbing. And she's like, well, I don't feel that way at all. I'd fucking run away. And it's like, yeah, I would want you to run away. That's just how things work. We are physically bigger. We have, stronger muscles, bigger bone density, all of this stuff. It's like, and I think what has happened is society has shifted in a way that women are now in the workforce and children are now in schools, and that is not inherently bad. But what has happened is we've become more isolated from the product of our labor and from the product of the things that we do, that we don't see the immediate knock-on effect. Maybe it's like we're just little isolated economic nodes that benefit somewhere down the line.
I agree with that.
And in the absence of that, we still subconsciously feel the inherent disposability. We still know that we are disposable in some way, physically and emotionally and all of this stuff. We feel in some way a little bit less important, a little bit disenfranchised. And I think that men are responding to that in one of two ways. They're either becoming apathetic and miserable, or they're getting angry. And that's not a good thing. And I don't think that the solution is taking women out of the workforce and all of that stuff. But I do think the solution is more of a focus on community and more of a focus on understanding as a man that it is your job to care for the people around you and trying to localize that more so that we see the immediate effects of it rather than the further ones. And I think some of the happiest people are like the firefighters and the policemen and stuff, the healthy ones, not the...
I know what you mean.
The people that see the immediate effects that they are protecting and caring for the people around them.
Yeah, I think most of what you said I agreed with. The only thing was with the expendability, like my sister had a kid a few years back, and it feels different for me now because suddenly there's like a little person whose life I'm influencing. And like my wife and I are planning, we want her to get a little bit further into her program, but we're hoping to have kids in the next couple of years as well. And like, I will say a lot shifts when you start thinking about kids a bit more, because it does get to the point of like, would I die for my country when I have kids? In a defensive war, almost certainly. But
I would die for my fucking country. I'd die for my children.
Fair enough. But when I say country, I'm using it as a community, not as like a state.
Right.
And I agree that like that localization also doesn't, these days at least, doesn't necessarily have to be geographically local either. I think there are ways that you can have a community online. I think one of the big problems with that is, to your point about the immediacy or the seeing the results. Like, if you're not going to defend a Discord for not getting banned or something like that, like, there's definitely something there. But I do definitely think, like, for me at least, like, I felt that way. I felt very much like I am contributing to SiriusXM, some billion-dollar, conglomerate corporation, and I'm some tiny cog and I don't matter. And then suddenly there's a kid who's like so happy to see me. And things did shift for me. Maybe that's just me. I don't want to extrapolate that out to a generality necessarily. I'd have to sit with it a bit more.
No, I think it does change as well. Like, even if, I'm not saying now that you have someone to take care of, you're still going out and gathering the resources and bringing them back for the benefit of the kid, and that's fine. But I think a lot of people, and especially a lot of young men, if they don't have a relationship, if they don't have community, if they don't have this thing, or even if they have it but they don't feel very connected to it because it's a surface level thing or whatever, that causes a fuck of a lot of disenfranchisement, and it causes like this feeling of lack of purpose. And I really do think there is an inherent disposability in men that needs to be put towards something. And if it's not put towards something, you just don't feel the purpose. You just feel the disposability.
We might be saying the same thing, but saying it in different ways. Let me say something to you, and maybe this will make sense to you. Like, someone once described to me as like the iPhone problem, which is the issue of like, back in the day, if I wanted to, I don't know, like make a sword or something, I knew where the iron came from, I knew the smith, I knew how it was turned into a sword, like vaguely, and like the end product of the sword was actually somewhat direct. I kind of knew everyone involved in the process to some extent. But with an iPhone, it's like, okay, well, what happens is first we trick rocks into thinking. Then we trick these other rocks into being tubes for the thoughts to go through. And by the time it winds up in my hand, I'm so disconnected from the totality of the global supply chain that it took to get there that I definitely feel as though the iPhone is in a sense disposable. So if you're saying it in that sense of the sense
or like if you order a meal from the restaurant, it's very different from the one that you like. You raise the chickens, you get the eggs, you like you're far more connected to the process.
Okay. Yeah, in that case, I like, okay, so then I guess my only issue would be with the use of the word disposable. But in terms of everything else, like, I do agree with what you're saying then. Yeah, for sure.
I'm using disposable in that I think as a sex, men are more disposable than women physically. We are designed to be more willing to die.
Let me put it this way. If I said replaceable instead of disposable, would you say that
same thing? Yes.
Okay. Then Then I think we understand what we're saying. Yeah. My thing was I was thinking you meant it more in the sense of like uselessness or disposable in the sense of like there's a set amount.
It becomes uselessness without a purpose or someone to take care of. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. But I more meant in the sense of like,
I just mean disposable in the, you know, if someone comes to stab, I'm the one taking the stabbing.
No. And I agree with what you're saying.
Replaceable.
I was thinking of it as like a single-use plastics or something like that, like disposable in the sense of like, whereas I think you're saying in the sense of like you're slotting into a system, but that system is rather impersonal, and your slot within that system means that you can easily be disposed of and replaced with another man because of that. That is something I'd agree with. Yes. Okay. I understand
if you have 10 men and 10 women and you kill 9 of the women, that tribe isn't surviving. You kill 9 of the men, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. I understand what you mean. Yeah. At one point, humans, I think we got down to less than like 500 of us, and we just fucked our way back to dominance. Yeah.
I heard 10,000, but 500 is fucking wild. Yeah, maybe I'm off. Like cataclysmic. Yeah. It was definitely less than 500. It's crazy. But yeah, I mean, that's what we do, isn't it? We fuck ourselves back to.
No, and I think, man, it's something that I think people, I don't know. There's certain things that I like have come around to on feminism, but the fucking like hating sex and hating men for liking sex, like that annoys the shit out of me because it's such a natural thing. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
It seems to me that stuff. It's like I have no. Like if women want to be in the workplace and do their thing, it's whatever. But and this is like a right wing argument, but it makes a fuck of a lot of sense to me. It's like, as a man, I want to. It's like I go out and work and whatever to take care of the family. That's fine. If a woman wants to do that as well, that's fine. But there's different roles within relationships, and some of those more feminine roles, like the nurturing and things like that, men can do those, but women are inherently better at them most of the time, or feminine people are better at some of those roles. And I think it's important as a person to find, like, I don't have an issue with anybody doing anything they want, but when it becomes a societally enforced sort of norm, that's when it becomes, and on either side, like whether it's you must conform to traditional roles or you must both conform to the whatever, I think it just causes conflict. And it's like, I live in Bulgaria now, and it's like the majority of the women that I meet are very traditionally minded in themselves. And it's actually strange because when I was in New York, I would go on dates and the women would always expect me to pay for shit, right? Even though it's more of like a liberal whatever culture. And they're like, you're earning, you earn more than me. You should be paying for this, right? But when I come here, the women are earning less than me, and often they're under the care of their father or whatever. But then if I go, I'm going to pay for this, sometimes on a date, they'll go, no, you're not, what are you fucking talking about? I'm going to pay for myself. Because in their mind, they're thinking, I have not given you the responsibility of taking care of me. It's like, you're not my boyfriend, you're not whatever. It's like, until we make that agreement, you're not responsible for me. But then when it happens, it's like, yeah, you are responsible for me now. But it's like, that's the deal that you're both making, and there are different roles within that.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with all that. The only thing I wanted to say was that I think is one of the problems I run into a lot when I talk statistics with people. Where I think if you talk about like the average woman being better at those things, yes, but there are certain women who are not as good at that, and there are certain men who are going to be better at that. And I think that a lot of what has brought me around on feminism is the idea of it more being about having the option. And that the toxic side of it, I agree, is when it becomes like, in order to be a successful woman, you have to have a job, be a mother, do everything. And I do agree that's
I
where
think most problems in life are caused by the fucking the feeling the need to fit in.
Yeah.
Like, if everybody was just like, what do I want and how do I find people that fit that? We'd all be doing so much, because it's like everybody
Yeah.
is either trying to fit to some existing mold or to enforce a mold on other people. And that just causes, I think there is like stereotypes and generalizations and like the way things are, quote unquote. I think if you just let everybody do whatever the fuck they want, most people would end up conforming to some sort of traditional role.
Of course.
But let's say like 20 to 30% of people wouldn't, and that's fine. And I think the problem has arisen that it has been like a societally enforced thing, and then it's like a pendulum. If it's too far in this direction, it's going to swing too far in the other one as well. And the issue that I find with quote unquote feminism is not like, you know, equal rights, equal, all of that stuff is fine. It's all about choice and whatever you want to do with yourself. I fully support that. Right? I'm a leave me the fuck alone, do whatever you want kind of person. But it has seemed, and again, things are changing now, but like, let's talk about, you know, Gamergate and like the 2010s to 2015 sort of era of feminism, which is, I think, what the reaction is still happening to, even though that's sort of faded and things are just sort of normalizing a bit.
We could talk about that. We could talk about that.
Okay.
But...
Maybe it's because I moved to Bulgaria. But it seemed like I want to take, like the women are saying, I want to take all of the qualities of masculinity for myself, while simultaneously devaluing it and telling you that you're wrong for being that way. Which just seemed strange and confusing for a lot of men. I just want to confirm before you answer that you are still recording.
Oh yeah, I am. Yeah. Cool. Oh yeah, I guess we are doing the podcast. Sorry, I thought we were just talking. I guess we are just talking. But anyway,
sorry, I don't mean to break.
No, you're totally fine. You're totally fine. Yeah, I think that when you're talking about, for me, it's a lot about like providing the option for people, because I think. Yes. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. Sorry, I totally lost my. What were you saying? What you were saying? Because there was a specific thing.
It was simultaneously taking masculinity for themselves while saying that it's wrong for us to be like that.
So I think, yeah. Sorry, God damn it. Give me 2 seconds here. Sorry.
You're good. Don't think about it. It'll come faster.
Yeah, you're right, actually. I'll just start talking. I think that when you're speaking about like feminism, one of the problems that people can get into is the idea of it pushing. For me, what I view it now as is a lot of trying to uplift certain stories to make those stories more culturally acceptable. Because I think we can agree in the same way you're saying, like, do whatever you want, fuck off and leave me alone. There are 10%, 20% of people, whatever, who are happier working in a career than they would be, raising kids barefoot and pregnant and all that stuff. And I think that the reason those stories get pushed more is it feels like that because a lot of times it's those people trying to uphold that to make it more acceptable. And in the way you're talking about a pendulum, I think it very much is a pendulum, and I think that's very much by design. Because what you do by kind of like over-saturating the market, I guess is one way to put it.
So you normalize it.
Yeah, exactly. And then once it's normalized, the pendulum can swing back. Now, the problem is that's never like a clean, neat, like it sounds good on paper, but it's never quite that clean and neat. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of the problems come from. So like now when I think back on some of that stuff, I think...
I mean, we're sorry, I'll let you finish.
Yeah, I just think that like, as much as I completely agree with you that there's certain ways in which the denigration of traditional kind of masculine traits has gone too far in a number of ways, I think where that came from is just the way the internet works. Because you start with a bunch of people who believe like women should be able to engage in these traits and men are doing some things that are too far. The kind of toxic masculinity thing we were talking about. And then when you couple that, or not couple that, but when you put that in a small community and they all talk about it amongst themselves, it gets extrapolated out into like all men are bad. In the same way that you get, I think, some of these men being like, well, women are only happy when they're at home raising kids and being pregnant and all that stuff.
Which is bullshit.
I think it's the same problem where it's like, in the same way you see the right wing swinging too far that way, you get the left wing swinging too far the other way, where it's like just this kind of radicalization of these smaller communities. Because naturally that happens. If you sit in a bunch of people and you all think you agree, and then someone says something a little more radical than the average, suddenly everyone goes, oh, I guess I also believed that. And then so on and so forth. The group gets smaller, blah, blah, blah. And you end up with these people saying like, God damn it, I knew that cat food was going to drop out at some point. But you end up saying like all all masculine traits are inherently negative. When it
Yeah.
comes from a good place of, hey, some guys are assholes. Like, you know.
And it's not even the majority of people. It's like it's
Yes.
a very
Yes.
small amount of people that are very, very loud
Mhm.
because they're just on the internet all the time. That's all
Well,
they
and
do.
because they're interesting. Like the internet, I think people know this, like rage bait is very much a thing that is popular on the internet. And I think in a number of ways, like my politics video fed into that to a certain extent, where like people got very mad at my video and that's what made it successful. But that's also why I very much didn't want to then pivot my channel into being a politics channel. I wanted to stay history. And I know that my views aren't going to be as good because YouTube thinks my channel's a politics channel now and it only shows my videos to politics people. But like, I'm okay with that because it will eventually learn that my channel's a history channel. It'll show it to those people and I'll get those numbers back because I don't want to contribute to necessarily like this culture of like, just let's all make each other mad and scream about it. Because as much as people are going to do that anyway, I think there's like really important ways that we can push back against that and allow for conversations in a healthier manner.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all and this is, I think this echoes in everything. It's like you're looking at it from a politics perspective, I'm looking at it from a dating perspective. It's like it's just division. There's just more and more and more polarization and division happening. And the problem is that when you have like the world is polar, right? Reality itself is polar. It's polar and gendered. And the problem is when you end up with in the middle is the healthiest place, and little pushes left and right help you explore different areas. But when you end up with groups like this, anytime they meet, it's violent. And there's a reaction. And again, you can look at that in chemistry and physics. It's just the way that reality works, not just social stuff. It causes a violent reaction. When I look at things in dating, it's like there's a bunch of men that are lonely and isolated and angry. Because they're lonely, they're engaging in quote unquote simping behavior. And then so you have all of these Instagram models and whatever. And we're essentially cultivating an entire subsection of women that all they do is flaunt their looks, and that's how they get by in life, and they don't work on any of the internal stuff. And then what happens is the guys complain about that, and it's like, well, these attractive women just treat us like we're disposable. It's like, you treat yourself like you're disposable, and then you simp for these women, and then you blame them for not developing a personality and other core skills and just flaunting their looks when that's what you're rewarding them for. It's like, it's your fault. It's your fault this is happening. Stop it. Bad.
And I think that's also like for me, that's the beauty of like modern society is like, I think women have always been getting by on their looks, maybe a smaller number of them
to an extent.
But I think with like the internet, it's like, if you're a hot girl, you can just get paid to be hot now. And the bar for that's lower.
Inflation.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is a thing that people have access to now that they didn't before. And then just like what you're saying, what people are upset at is the people taking advantage of the market that's there, not the people who are paying for it. It's the same thing where like, I don't hate people who like watch or I don't hate creators who make content that's like hateful or something like that. Just hate the people who watch them. Because if some random dude wants to make a video that's like, I hate gay people,
don't hate the player, hate the game.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think it's so silly when it's just we turn our anger towards the direct like thing with a face as opposed to the faceless thing that's really what's responsible for the whole thing.
It's like, oh, I don't like this sort of content. Stop fucking watching
exactly.
it. Yeah. All right. Members' questions. This is very clearly like neo-Nazi propaganda.
Let me just cuck out my brain to someone else, you know? Like, I'm a weird little freak. Like, I love sitting and getting into all the details.
Okay, how common were orgies?
Oh, God. Something that you could theoretically refer to as magic. Deifying your twink boyfriend is pretty cool. I'll give him that. It's funny, anytime I ask my wife, would you want to go back to any time in history? And she's like, no. And then I remember she's black.